Chapter 205. He couldn't tell them that this was a princess who had nothing to do and always wandered outside, so he only introduced her according to the identity of an arrestor. It was normal for an arrestor from the Yamen to visit the county lieutenant. Emmingzu came here just to see Li Yi and ask him what happened last night. Although Li Yi didn't say it directly, she could guess what happened after seeing the woman with the sword. She didn't intend to delve into this matter. After all, Li Yi's position in her heart was much more important than those villains. Of course, there were some unexpected gains. The young woman's martial arts was not weak. She had never met a match among her peers since she was a child. It was the first time that she met a peer that she didn't have the confidence to win. As for Li Yi's wife, the woman who appeared later, she seemed to be 1 or 2 years older than them. She easily forced the wet nurse to retreat, so she didn't want to compete with them. Although she didn't have any arrogance because of her martial arts, even the rare supreme masters in the martial arts world praised her as a rare martial arts genius. If she had enough opportunities, she might be able to step into the realm of supreme masters in her lifetime. However, the 2 women she saw today really made her suffer a big blow. Let's go. She had achieved her purpose of coming here. She waved her hand to Li Yi and turned to walk outside. The old woman followed her. Before leaving, she took a deep look at Lu Rui. The shock on her old face hadn't faded until now. You're leaving now. Don't you want to stay for dinner? Li Yi stood at the door and said aloud. Take good care of yourself. When you're well, report to the Yamen early. When the voice came, her figure also disappeared from Li Yi's sight. Li Yi shook his head. Why couldn't this woman be more sympathetic? He was injured like this, but she still wanted to exploit him. He didn't work for her family, why was she so anxious? It seemed that he really worked for her family. He let out a long sigh. It was hard to be a superior, but it was even harder to be the superior of the boss's daughter. After the old lady left, there was nothing to see. Rui helped him to sit on the bed. Fang had already run over to open the big box that Emmingzu had brought. Why are there so many small ones inside? After the lid was opened, Fang was a little surprised. He thought that there was something in the box, but he found that there were some small rectangular boxes in the big box. Oh my god, such a big ginseng. This is deer antler. Is this bird's nest? In front of Li Yi's family, Fang never treated himself as an outsider. He opened the boxes one by one and exclaimed in surprise. The things that Constable Li asked his men to carry were too valuable. Any one of them would probably be worth a lot of money. Having grown up in the mountains, he was extremely familiar with these medicinal herbs. Constable Li's family must be very rich, right? Xiao Huan stood beside Fang and muttered to herself when she saw his surprised expression. Not just rich, Constable Li's family is very rich. They have so much money that they can't even spend it all, Li said as he sat on the bed. These things might be precious to ordinary people, but in the imperial palace, there was no lack of these things. As the richest person in the entire Jing kingdom, a few small medicinal herbs were nothing to him. Perhaps Her Royal Highness used bird's nest to rinse her mouth in the morning. However, based on her style of doing things, it was slightly beyond Li Yi's expectations that she could bring these things here. Lu Rui brought him back to the prefecture to look for a doctor after he was injured and unconscious yesterday. Given his current physical condition, it was not good for him to return to the village. As such, Xiao Huan and Rui stayed behind to take care of him. There were 2 rooms at the back of the courtyard that could be used as bedrooms. One was where Li Yi was currently sleeping, and the other was simply tidied up by Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan and Rui would sleep there at night. Last night, she waited alone in the village. When she heard that her son-in-law was injured, she felt uneasy the whole night. At dawn, she came down the mountain with Fang. By the time Rui finished cooking, the sleepy servant girl had already fallen asleep in the room. Just as Li Yi, who had turned into an injured person, was enjoying the degenerate life of having food, clothes, and even having someone to help him walk, the old woman who was walking with Li Mingzhu frowned and said in disbelief, "That's impossible. Even if that young lady started practicing martial arts in her mother's womb, it's impossible. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible." The old woman shook her head repeatedly. "Nanny, what's impossible?" From the beginning, Li Mingzhu could not help but turn to look at her in confusion when she saw her muttering to herself. That girl named Rui? The old woman frowned. How old is she? How is it possible that she has reached the Grandmaster realm? Grandmaster? Emmingzu looked at her and her beautiful eyes were filled with astonishment. The weight of these 2 words was very clear to anyone who practiced martial arts. There were many people who practiced martial arts in the entire Jing kingdom, but the number of grandmasters could be counted on 2 hands. As for those grandmasters, Which one of them did not have decades of accumulation of martial arts to reach the realm of returning to one's natural state? Lu Rui, how old was she? Even if she started practicing martial arts in her mother's womb, it was impossible. One should know that she had practiced martial arts for 10 years and had been taught by countless famous teachers. Until now, she had not even touched the threshold of the Grandmaster realm. It was possible that she would never be able to enter that realm in her lifetime, let alone a commoner girl. Isn't this a little too inconceivable? Is it true that I'm old and my body is failing? The old woman raised her hands and looked at them with doubt on her face. After all, she still did not believe that the young girl had reached the legendary realm. Perhaps it was just that the young girl's kung fu was special. That force just now was both gentle and overbearing. She had lived for decades and fought with countless people, but it was the first time that she had encountered such a force. If she did not prepare in advance, she was afraid that anyone below the Grandmaster realm would be at a disadvantage. Looking up at Mingzhu's surprised expression, she shook her head and threw that unrealistic idea to the back of her mind. She comforted her, "Princess, your talent is already rare in this world. Don't be too disappointed. In my opinion, the internal energy that the two girls practiced was extraordinary. I'm afraid that it was not inferior to the martial arts in the palace. They must have been taught by a Grandmaster realm master for a long time. Otherwise, no matter how talented they are, they would not be able to reach the realm they have today. This Willow Leaf village is not simple." Speaking of this, there was a trace of inexplicable meaning in her tone. "Personally taught by a Grandmaster realm master," Mingzhu murmured. A Grandmaster realm master was already standing at the peak of martial arts. In order to seek a breakthrough, he was always elusive. Even if she was a princess, it was impossible for her to force a Grandmaster to follow her and carefully teach her since childhood. Could it be that there was a Grandmaster in Willow Leaf Village? Chapter 206. In the room Rui was making the bed. Lu Rui walked in and said in surprise, "Sister, you've broken through?" The old lady who was fighting with her in the yard just now was extremely close to the Grandmaster realm. Judging from how her sister easily forced her to retreat just now, she was afraid that she had already entered the realm that all martial arts practitioners dreamed of. Lu Rui nodded and did not deny it. She said, "I've just broken through. I still need some time to stabilize." Although she said it in a light and breezy manner, her heart was still filled with astonishment at this unexpected matter. Although she was only one step away from the supreme power realm, she might not be able to cross this step for the rest of her life. Hard work, talent, opportunity, and even luck were all crucial factors to cross this step. In the martial arts world, there were many masters who were one step away from the supreme power realm, but there were only a few of them. It showed how difficult it was to cross this step. Thinking of the reason for her breakthrough, Lu Rui looked back at her and said, "After some time, I'll teach you Tai Chi. It should be helpful for you to break through the realm." Tai Chi? A trace of doubt appeared on Lu Rui's face. Wasn't this the messy punching method that Li Yi often used? He did not know martial arts and was full of nonsense. Lu Rui did not take her sister's nonsense to heart the last time she messed around with him. However, it was definitely not a spur-of-the-moment thing for her to mention this matter. Lu Rui was certain that it was not a spur-of-the-moment thing. Could it be? She suddenly thought of a ridiculous possibility and looked back at the door. In the yard, Li Yi was being supported by Xiao Huan. He was asking Fong to move the chair out. He always felt bored lying in the room. Compared to that, he preferred to bask in the sun in the yard. About an hour later, Lu Rui walked out of the room and looked at Li Yi, who was lying on the chair and telling a story to Xiao Huan. She was confused. At the same time, in the tile-roofed house next to Rui's house, the brothel, which usually only had a few customers, was now full. Some people were standing in the aisle, making it extremely crowded. The old storyteller sat on the stage with a serious face. His voice was hoarse, which was different from before, giving people a gloomy feeling. That evil ghost's skin was emerald green and her teeth were extremely sharp. She only had white eyes but no pupils. She spread out a piece of human skin on the couch and took out a colored brush to draw on it. Not long after, the evil ghost threw the brush down and draped the human skin over her body. The evil ghost wearing the human skin turned into the woman who had returned home with Wang Sheng. The old man's voice was gloomy. As he told the story, he could make a strange sound that made people's hair stand on end. It was like the evil ghost's voice. Some people looked excited, some looked pale, but their eyes were still fixed on the old man, unwilling to move away for a moment. When they heard the exciting part and saw that the old man was no longer speaking, they took out copper coins and threw them on the stage, urging loudly, Hee hee brother, I didn't lie to you, did I? Among the crowd, a strong man looked at the pale man beside him and said with a smile. The man looked back at him and said with a trembling voice, I believe. At first, the man said that after hearing the story of the painted skin, he did not even dare to go to the toilet at night. He still did not believe it and felt that the man was either too timid or exaggerated. After all, he was a frequent customer of these brothels and had heard many strange stories, but he had never heard of one that could scare people like this. Today he was dragged here by this man and felt disdain in his heart. However, when he came here he found that all the seats were occupied, and there was not even a place to stand in front. He could not help but be surprised. Even the busiest brothel had never seen such a bustling scene. Although the crowd was bustling, when the old man spoke, the entire brothel immediately became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone held their breath. If anyone made the slightest noise, they would immediately be condemned by the crowd. Just now, he even saw a man who could not stop burping being thrown out by two men by the arm. He had never seen such a scene before, and he began to believe the man's words. As the old man slowly told the story, he no longer had the mood to doubt the man. It was not a cliché story about a gifted scholar or a beautiful woman, nor was it one of those ghost stories that he was tired of hearing. The story was novel and connected. Just as he was wondering why the Taoist priest said that Wang Xing was a man who was about to die, the old man finally told him the reason. It turned out that the woman was actually an evil ghost in human skin. Just the thought of how the human skin was peeled off caused his face to turn pale. Just as he put himself in Wang Sheng's shoes, he realized that the beautiful woman who had been partying with him every night was actually an evil ghost. The old man's description of the evil ghost was so detailed and vivid that his mind could not help but think of that scene. Most importantly, the old man would occasionally let out a few ghostly cries, causing all the hair on his body to stand on end. Although he was afraid, there was also a different kind of pleasure that made him want to continue listening. If Li Yi was here, he would also be amazed. This old man was indeed a professional storyteller. Whether it was the creation of a terrifying atmosphere or the magical vocal skills, Li Yi would never be able to catch up to him. When Wang Sheng saw the painted skin of the evil ghost with his own eyes, the story had reached a climax. As expected, the old man stopped abruptly and said something along the lines of, "If you want to know what happens next, listen to the next chapter." Before the audience could react, the old man had already fled. "What do you mean? It's gone just like that. He's playing this trick again. I've heard this part 3 times already. I want to know what happens next." The silence of the crowd did not last long before it erupted like a volcano. Even the other brothels were affected. One by one, the performers and singers were performing, and their voices were suppressed. They could only watch as the customers left one by one and walked toward the brothels with grief and indignation on their faces. Yesterday and today, this was the second time their business had been stolen. This was too much, too much. At this moment, the old man was hiding behind the stage with a helpless look on his face. He also wanted to know what happened next, but that scholar only told him this part. Originally, he had wanted to give it a try and told the story of the painted skin last night. He did not expect so many people to come this morning, and it was hard for him to back down. If something like this happened again next time, his old bones would be torn apart by those people. Li was telling a horror story to Xiao Huan in the courtyard to train her courage. Suddenly, a chaotic sound came from afar, and he and the young maidservant looked in the direction of the sound at the same time. Their vision was blocked by the courtyard wall. Just as they were about to look away, a head popped out from the wall. The next moment, Xiao Huan's face turned pale, and she subconsciously screamed. A ghost. Just a moment ago, the young master said that the ghost could still speak after its head was chopped off by the Taoist priest. The next moment, a head appeared on the wall. After the scream, the head on the wall disappeared. Li Yi heard a young girl's ouch from the other side of the wall. Chapter 207. Young master, did you just now, over there? Xiao Huan rubbed her eyes. The head that just popped out from the top of the wall had disappeared. She hid behind Li Yi and pointed at the top of the wall. Her voice was still trembling. There was a rustling sound outside the wall. When she pointed, the head popped out again. This time he could see clearly that the owner of the head was a girl about the same age as him. She had light makeup on her face and she looked pretty. Her face was not as pale as the young master had described. Her eyes were 2 big black holes and her tongue was not even 5 feet long, so it was not a ghost. What are you screaming for? The girl who stuck her head out from the other side of the wall glared at Xiao Huan. She rubbed her sore butt and looked at the young man lying on the chair in the yard. She was playing in the yard when she heard a familiar voice coming from outside the wall. She put her ear to it and listened. At first she did not know who the voice belonged to. Later she was scared by the ghost story the voice told and finally remembered. It was the young man who scared her with the story of painted skin, in the brothel yesterday. He moved a stool from the house and placed it under the wall of the courtyard. He stuck his head out to take a look, but just as he steadied himself, he was frightened by the little girl's ghostly cry. He lost his footing and fell down. Even now his buttocks were still aching. When she got up and looked at the young man again, she saw that his leg was wrapped in white cloth. She asked curiously, "What happened to you?" "I was bitten by a dog when I went home last night." Li looked at the girl called Xiaozhu who was lying on the wall and said casually, "Oh." Xiaozhu looked at him and could already imagine that he had not only been bitten by the dog last night, but had also had a desperate struggle with the vicious dog. "Can you tell me the story after painted skin?" The girl called Xiaozhu leaned on the wall and looked at Li Yi. Her big eyes were filled with expectation. Yesterday, after the young man left, she told the story to Grandpa Sunday. Grandpa Sun originally planned to wait until he heard the complete story before he tried to tell it on stage. However, he didn't expect that yesterday afternoon, those men who heard the story pulled a lot of people over and insisted on listening to the story of the painted skin. Grandpa Sun had no choice but to tell the first half of the story. As a result, in less than a quarter of an hour, the money that the guests gave was equal to the income of the whole brothel for a day. Unfortunately, the story only lasted for half an hour. Grandpa Sun stopped abruptly at the exciting part. The guests left disappointed. Although they did not ask for the money back, they did not have anything good to say. If they could hear the story after painted skin, they would not have to worry about their livelihood in a short time. After all, for ordinary actors and actresses like them, money was the only way to survive. They were not like those famous actors and actresses who were often invited by high officials and nobles to perform and were often rewarded handsomely. "Sure." Li looked at the girl and said. Wang Xing hid outside the window and peeped at the evil ghost's painted skin. He screamed in fear and was discovered by the evil ghost. He was cut open and his heart and lungs were dug out. He died. Xiao Huan looked at the girl leaning on the wall and then looked at the son-in-law. She was puzzled. The painted skin that the son-in-law told Second Miss was not like this. Although she did not dare to continue listening, she knew that there should be a long story behind it. Of course, other than being puzzled, she was also curious about who this girl was. She seemed to know the son-in-law, and the son-in-law even told her the story of painted skin. This is the end. The girl leaned on the wall with a blank expression on her face. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't the following story be more complicated and bizarre? Wang Xing died just like that? What about the expert she met on the street? This was completely illogical. She was sure that if Grandpa Sun told the story like this, the guests would definitely not throw money on the stage but shoes and stones. Despicable guy. Knowing that he was perfunctory, she resisted the urge to remove a clay brick from the wall and threw it over. She weighed her foot and said, "I will steal a few pieces of osmanthus cake from Sister Ruoqing for you." "How many pieces?" Li looked up at the wall. 5 pieces. The girl gritted her teeth and said, 10 pieces. Li Yi directly doubled the number. 6 pieces, no more. "I won't do it without 9 pieces. After a fierce bargaining, the price was finally set at 7 pieces of osmanthus cake. The girl did not give in at all. Stingy. Seeing that the girl went down the wall, probably to steal the osmanthus cake, Li Yi curled his lips. At such a young age, she already knows how to bribe. This girl will be amazing when she grows up. Son-in-law, what osmanthus cake? Xiao Huan was stunned. She also knew how to make osmanthus cake. Why did the son-in-law ask that girl for it? That time when we guessed the lantern riddles, in that something building? After Li Yi's reminder, Xiao Huan finally remembered, and then she was a little depressed. The osmanthus cake she made was indeed not as delicious as that time. This time, the waiting time was not short, at least more than a quarter of an hour before the girl's head poked over the wall. Here you are. She handed over something wrapped in a handkerchief from the other side of the wall. Xiao Huan was too short to reach it, so she went to the shop and called Fang out. She took the handkerchief from the girl and gave it to Li Yi. Opening the handkerchief, there were 7 pieces of osmanthus cake, not one more, not one less. Give me back the handkerchief. The girl said from the wall. What's the hurry? I will give it back to you after I finish eating. If he gave the handkerchief back to her, there would be nothing left to wrap the osmanthus cake. Li waved his hand and said, "Then give me back the piece you took yesterday." The girl thought for a moment and said, "The handkerchief was a girl's more private item. It was a bit inappropriate for a strange man to take it." That piece. Li thought of the handkerchief that was used to wrap the remaining osmanthus cake yesterday. It seemed that he had put it away casually. He didn't see it today, so he probably dropped it on the road yesterday. "I lost it." He looked at the girl and said, "You?" The girl almost fell off the stool in anger. Just as she was about to say something, a voice came from inside the house. "Yuju, did you see the osmanthus cake I just put in the room? I will come back later." A trace of panic flashed across the girl's face. She hurriedly jumped off the stool and ran into the house. "Sister Ruoqing, I didn't see it." 7 pieces of osmanthus cake, one was given to Fang and one to Xiao Huan. Perhaps hearing the movement just now, Lu Rui also came out of the room. Looking at the thing in Li Yi's hand, she asked in confusion, "Husband, where did you get it?" "A neighbor gave it to me." Li Yi stretched out his hand and said, "Do you want one?" One piece was given to Rui, and the other 2 pieces were snatched away by Rui, who happened to bump into him. Looking at the 2 pieces of osmanthus cake left in his hand, Li Yi regretted it a little. He should have insisted just now. Maybe he could have asked for a few more pieces. Speaking of which, this little girl is quite easy to deceive. I don't have to worry about eating osmanthus cake in the future. Chapter 208. Many things were always treasured after they were lost. Before, Li Yi felt that being a county lieutenant was boring. He was always entangled by trivial things that had nothing to do with him. He would rather lie at home or bask in the sun in the courtyard of Rui's workshop. Now, his wish to lie in the courtyard and bask in the sun had really come true. Since he was injured, his range of activities was limited to his room and this small courtyard. If he wanted to go through the shop to have a look outside, he would be stopped by Fang. Xiao Huan and Rui returned to the stockade village. Since they were going to stay here for a while, they naturally needed to bring some daily necessities and change of clothes. Rui also went back, leaving Li Yi alone in the courtyard. He was the only one in the courtyard and there was no one to talk to. After a while, Li Yi began to miss the girl named Piglet. At least, there was someone to talk to, so he wouldn't be bored. Even if he had countless books in his head to relieve his boredom, he couldn't compare with a beautiful young girl in her 20s. It didn't take long for the beautiful young girl to climb up the wall again. Phew. Sister Ruoqing finally went out. The young girl looked back and let out a long sigh of relief. Seeing that Li Yi was still lying on the chair in the courtyard, she was relieved. "Don't tell Sister Ruoqing about the osmanthus cake." This time, the young girl seemed to have put the chair under her feet a little higher, so she could fold her arms and lie on the wall. She looked at Li Yi and said this. "Don't worry." After getting a positive answer from Li Yi, the young girl stared at him with big sparkling eyes, waiting for him to fulfill his promise. Li Yi didn't want to lie to a young girl. Besides, it was not easy for someone to talk to him, so he adjusted to a comfortable position and said, "Wang Xing climbed over the wall and returned home." "Yes, I have. Last time, I said that Wang Xing peeped outside the window at the female ghost painting her skin on the bed." The young girl said hurriedly, "What's the rush? What's the rush? I haven't gotten into the zone yet." Li Yi glanced at her, then slowly said, "Wang Xing was very scared when he saw that the female ghost had turned into a woman who played with him every night. He was so scared that his soul almost flew away. Finally, he remembered the Taoist priest he met on the street and hurriedly chased after him." The girl's expression was focused. She secretly memorized the plot that he said and then passed it on to Grandpa Sunday. With the follow-up story, those customers would probably give more money, right? The original story of the painted skin was not long. Wang Xing saved a woman and hid it in his house despite his wife's advice. However, the woman turned out to be an evil ghost. After digging out Wang Xing's heart and lungs, she escaped. Later, she was killed by a Taoist priest with a peachwood sword. Wang Xing's wife found an extraordinary person and saved Wang Xing. The ending was a happy one, but the plot was full of twists and turns. Speaking of which, there was even a little erotic element to it, which made it more attractive to men. It had the elements to sell well in this world. The original painted skin was only about 2,000 words. Unlike the old man, Li Yi did not have to add to the atmosphere from time to time. It was similar to a flat and straightforward narration. It did not take long for him to reach the ending. "Thank you for your story. I'll leave first. Remember to keep the osmanthus cake a secret." After listening to the story, the girl had achieved her goal. Her feet were a little numb after standing for a long time. She wanted to quickly tell Grandpa Sun before she forgot the plot. Rui and the others had not returned from the village yet. If the girl left, who could he talk to relieve his boredom? Fong? After thinking about it, he gave up. There was too much of a generation gap and it was not easy to communicate. Seeing that the girl turned her head and was about to jump down, Li spoke again. For the sake of the osmanthus cake, in addition to the painted skin, I'll give you another story called Ing Ning. Ing Ning? The girl's movements slowed down. She turned around and looked at Li again. There was actually a buy one get one free deal? The scholar Prince Fu met a beautiful woman at the Lantern Festival. He picked up the plum blossoms that the girl had dropped. After returning home, he missed her so much that he fell ill. It was another story that she had never heard before. The girl immediately stopped thinking about it and listened carefully. One painted skin could only solve the problem temporarily. When the customers got tired of listening to it, the brothel would still face the same predicament as before. Of course, the more stories there were, the better. At this moment, she was even thinking that she must get the stories of Legend of the White Snake, and a Chinese ghost story, that this gentleman had told her previously. Anyway, the price was only a few pieces of osmanthus cake. Even if elder sister Ruoqing found out, she probably wouldn't blame her. Moreover, she had eaten quite a lot of them before. This time it was naturally not for the sake of telling a story. Li slowed down the speed of his narration. Sometimes, the girl would interrupt and ask some questions that she did not understand. That missing Ning is so innocent. When the girl spoke again, she raised her head and looked forward. Suddenly she shrank her head back. While Li was puzzled, there was a sound of messy footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw a few people passing through the shop and walking towards the courtyard. Fong did not stop them because they were all acquaintances. Li Xian asked the guards behind him to carry boxes of different sizes into the courtyard, while he walked towards Li Yi. I heard from Emingzu that you were injured, so I came to have a look. The people of the Li family were very polite, unlike County Magistrate Liu, who came to visit the patient empty-handed. Not to mention whether he was secretly happy in his heart, at least these gifts showed enough sincerity. In fact, Li Yi hadn't seen Li Xian for many days. A few days ago he was still curious. With Li Xian's personality, it wasn't normal for him to hold back for so long and not look for him to refresh his worldview. When he raised his head to look at him, he was stunned and said doubtfully, I haven't seen you for a few days. Why do you look so haggard? Even if you go to the Jade Courtyard every day, it shouldn't be like this, right? Speaking of this matter, Li Xian could not help but smile bitterly. He waved his hand and said, Don't mention it. Since Mother's birthday banquet, Father has not allowed me to step out of the prince's mansion. He invited several great scholars to teach me some inexplicable things all day long. So annoying. If Emingzi did not go to the prince's mansion to visit Mother and let me find such an excuse to come out, I'm afraid that I would still be facing those troublesome old guys in the prince's mansion. He looked at Li Yi, who was leisurely lying in the courtyard and basking in the sun, and his face was full of envy. As a dignified prince, his life was not as carefree as his. Naturally, his heart was extremely depressed. Let's go. I've been bored to death in the prince's mansion these days. It's not easy to come out today. I'd like to invite you to the Jade Courtyard to relax. Looking at him, he did not look like he was seriously injured. Li Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about these annoying things. He looked at Li Yi and said, I'm seriously injured this time. I'm afraid it's not convenient. You should go by yourself. Li Yi said with a dry cough. Where? Just as Li Xian was about to speak, he suddenly felt a chill run through his body. He quickly turned his head and saw a few figures standing behind him looking at him. The little servant girl who won with 2 stones, the heroine who could fly in the sky, and Li Yi's wife that he saw the other day. Hello, sister-in-law. Looking at the woman in the middle, Li Xian's expression froze. He then copied Li Yi and coughed dryly. His expression was incomparably awkward. Chapter 209. Xiao Huan secretly asked Uncle Fong what kind of place the Jadeite courtyard was and why this young master wanted to invite her son-in-law to the Jadeite courtyard to relax. Could he relax by going to the Jadeite courtyard? After getting a vague answer from Fong, the servant girl looked at Li Xian as if she was guarding against a thief. Now she already understood what a place like a brothel was for. This young master was too evil to want to bring her son-in-law to such a place. If not for the fact that he carried boxes of gifts into the courtyard when he came, Xiao Huan might not have chased him away, but she would not have served him tea like now. Watching her son-in-law talk to him in the courtyard, Xiao Huan stood far away but did not leave. She was always on guard against any bad ideas he might have. On the other hand, Fang looked at Li Xian with a look of appreciation. The jadeite courtyard was a place he had always wanted to enter. He had not seen her for a long time, and he wondered how Miss Little Hong was doing. The young maidservant stood behind the pillar, constantly on guard. Further away, old Fang leaned against the wall of the courtyard. His usually simple and honest face had a rather complicated expression on it. Teaching some strange things, don't you like these? Li Yi thought of what Li Xian had said and looked up at him. Although what you said is strange, it is the truth of heaven and earth that has been verified. How can you say it is strange? Li Xian's face showed a gloomy expression again. He said, they teach history, poetry, calligraphy and painting, even riding, archery and battle formations. When Li Yi heard this, he also had some doubts in his heart. History, poetry, calligraphy and painting. These were almost the necessary skills for scholars in this world, especially those young princes and princes. They would probably receive strict instruction from a young age. Although they would not be allowed to participate in the imperial examinations, this was the embodiment of the education of the royal family. The members of the royal family might have many flaws in their character, but they were rarely mediocre. Of course, the descendants of the imperial family were different from those coquettish sluts outside. Not only the emperor but the entire world would keep an eye on them. They would be groomed in all aspects from a young age. They would be able to control women with their pen, they would be able to bring peace to the world with their pen, and they would be able to control the world with their martial arts. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were well versed in both the pen and the sword. However, none of this seemed to have anything to do with Li Xian. Those sons of the imperial house had been educated from a young age. Logically, Li Xian should have had this experience long ago. Ning Wang wanted him to relearn these things. Did he want him to become the top scorer? Li Yi was a little disappointed in his heart. If Li Xian could maintain his previous enthusiasm and go further on that road, he might really become an outstanding scientist in the future. His name would also be remembered by future generations. However, now he was forcibly led to the wrong path and learned those useless things. A scientific genius was strangled in the cradle like this. In the next few thousand years, people might still remember the Jing kingdom that once existed, but there should not be many people who remembered this generation's Emperor Jing. If Ning Wang did not do anything earth-shattering in this life such as rebellion, the only people who knew about Ning Wang were those old scholars who studied the history of the Jing kingdom. As for Ning Wang's son, who would be so free to investigate these things? Looking at Li Yi's regretful eyes, Li Xian sighed. He missed the free and unfettered days before. If he could be as leisurely as Li Yi, even if he was a little injured like him, he would be willing. You have a lot of bad ideas. There is one more thing, you have to help me. Suddenly, as if he remembered something, Li Xian turned to look at him, his eyes shining. If it weren't for the fact that he was injured, Li Yi wouldn't have cared if he was a little prince or not. Li Xian did not feel that there was anything wrong with what he said just now. He looked at Li Yi hopefully and asked, "Father has arranged a marriage for me, but I do not want to get married yet. Is there any way to break the engagement? As the saying goes, it is better to tear down 10 temples than to regret a marriage. There would be retribution for doing such an immoral thing." However, this was not what Li Yi was thinking about now. He now doubted whether Li Xian was a man or not. In this era, people generally got married at a young age. 15 was the age for marriage. If they were not married after 16, they would be like Rui and invite the official matchmaker to their home. Of course, the official matchmaker would not dare to go to Ning Wang Fu to force a marriage even if he had 10 guts. However, Li Xian was almost 20 now. Even he was forced to leave his single life, but he, as the heir, was still a single dog. This was really not normal. Although he kept saying Jade Yard all day long, Li Yi knew that he was not enlightened on the matters between men and women. To be honest, although Li Yi had not experienced this kind of thing in his 2 lifetimes, he would think about it occasionally. It was just that he and Rui had not changed their respectful way of getting along, so it was naturally impossible for them to consummate the marriage like a real husband and wife. As an old single dog, the first thing he thought of after the engagement was not to be wild with joy, but to destroy it. Li Yi began to worry about his sexual orientation. He turned his head to look at Li Xian and found that he was looking at him with a fiery gaze. Li Yi's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? No, this was a matter of principle. Although this guy was not bad-looking and had a good family background, he had a normal sexual orientation. It was the right way to get Rui as soon as possible. He would not succumb to his despotic power. Fang, see the guest off. He could not continue this conversation and he could not come up with any ideas, so he hurriedly summoned Fang over. Fang, who trotted over, did not know what had happened, but was quickly driven away by Li Xian. Fang now knew that this pretty boy who had a close relationship with the son-in-law had a very high background. He could not afford to provoke either of them. It was the right way to protect himself. "Are you serious?" Li looked at him again and asked. Li Xian nodded, and the expression on his face could not be any more real. "Is that girl ugly?" Li was very curious. To be rejected by Li Xian so resolutely, that girl must be so ugly that even ghosts and gods would cry. Li Xian shook his head. "I have seen her portrait. She is as beautiful as a flower, and is a rare beauty in the world." Li was not surprised about this. Although this little prince was not very reliable, he was the only son of Prince Ning, and he would inherit the title in the future. Choosing a concubine was a very important matter, and it could not be done so carelessly. The current concubine would be the future concubine. To some extent, it represented the face of the royal family. Naturally, it was impossible to choose an ugly one. He had seen Princess Ning and also the Empress. Although the two were no longer youthful from their current charm, it could be seen that they must have been great beauties when they were young. This showed that Prince Ning and the Emperor's aesthetic was normal, unlike a certain dynasty in the future where there were 3,000 beauties in the harem, and none of them were good-looking. Since he had such a beautiful fiancée, why did he break the engagement? Returning to the original question, Li looked at him and asked tentatively, "You wouldn't like men, right?" Chapter 210. Li Yi's suspicion made Li Xian feel insulted. He tried to explain that his sexual orientation was normal, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that Li Yi's suspicion was not unreasonable. If Li Yi told him that he wanted to divorce the beautiful woman named Lu Rui, perhaps Li Xian would have the same suspicion as him. It's not strange that you don't want to admit it. In fact, sometimes you don't even realize that you like men. Li Yi gave a scientific explanation. In this era's upper-class society, some people even regarded this as a very elegant thing. If Li Xian really had this tendency, Li Yi would not discriminate against Li Xian who liked men. However, not discriminating was not discriminating, he still had to keep a distance. "Don't worry, liking men is not a shameful thing. There's no need. Hey, why are you looking at me like that?" He suddenly raised his voice. After a moment, Li Yi spoke again. "Actually, there is a way." Li Yi was worried that if he did not give him an explanation today, he would start to have ideas about him. After listening to Li Xian's solemn explanation again, Li Yi roughly understood why he wanted to ruin this marriage. In this era where the parents' orders and the matchmaker's words dominated the marriage before marriage, no matter how the other party looked, it was the same as covering them with a quilt. Didn't most people live like this? However, in every era, there were awakened people and pioneers who were unwilling to follow the crowd. Li Xian probably belonged to this kind of people. He could not accept that the person who would accompany him for the rest of his life was a woman who was still very unfamiliar to him. For this reason he would rather be a single dog for a few more years. His thinking was so simple that it even made Li Yi feel a little respect in his heart. After all, in today's world, there were not many people who had such avant-garde thinking. Now go to the streets. If you see a beautiful woman, get those guards to tie her up on the streets. Tie her up in a secluded place. I don't need to teach you what to do next, right? If you think one isn't enough, you can kidnap a few more. In this way, I'm sure no clan would be willing to marry their young lady to you. Once and for all, why not? Li Yi looked at him and suggested with a serious expression. Leading a group of lackeys to tease innocent women on the streets was something he had always dreamed of. Unfortunately, he did not transmigrate well. A poor scholar naturally did not have that many lackeys, so this dream could only be postponed indefinitely. However, Li Xian was different. He was a young prince. When he went out, there would always be a few bodyguards with extraordinary martial arts. Wouldn't kidnapping a few girls be a piece of cake for him? Li Xian had been waiting expectantly for Li Yi's brilliant plan, but after listening to him, the look of anticipation on his face froze. Harming innocent women. This was a really good idea. If he really did that, of course this marriage could be ruined. As a prospective princess, the woman's family was also one of the few big families in the Jing kingdom. She was even qualified to marry a prince. Naturally, they would not allow the noble daughter of the family to marry a man with a moral character, even if the other party was the heir to the throne in the future. Of course, if the marriage was ruined, there would not be much impact. With the power of the prince's mansion, they could quickly settle the matter and even find the heir's consort. There would still be countless people eyeing that position. However, not to mention whether his father would let him off easily, even he himself could not accept such a thing. This suggestion was equivalent to not saying anything. He knew that this matter involved many people, so he could not let Li Yi be involved. He looked deeply at Li Yi and waved his hand helplessly. Let's go. When he asked Li Yi just now, he actually did not have much hope in his heart. Although he was born into a noble family, whether it was the power or the wealth in his hands, it was something that ordinary people could never hope to achieve in their lifetime. In the future he would inherit his father's throne, and his status would be above tens of thousands of people. He could be said to be the favored son of the heavens with unlimited glory. However, this did not mean that he could decide everything. In fact, he did not have the power to decide most things. Of course, this included marriage. In the past 10 years he had been walking the path set by others. He could only find some fun under the premise that he did not go astray. For example, he hid his identity and mingled in the circle of scholars. Like them, he wandered around the big brothels, but every time he only listened to music. Of course, these were all small fun. After meeting Li Yi, he found the real fun in life. It was as if a wider world had opened up for him. Only Li Yi was different from those who only knew how to flatter and flatter. Li Yi could make him temporarily forget his identity as a prince, and get along with others as an ordinary person in the way he liked. However, the current him was feeling more and more pressure from all sides. Even going to the jadeite courtyard to listen to music like before had become an extravagant hope. He could only hope that there would be such a place in the future. There was no little prince here, only Li Xian. He could sit opposite Li Yi with Mingzu without any scruples, and the table was full of delicious and novel dishes. The man surnamed Fang stood not far away and looked at them bitterly, probably scolding them in his heart for robbing his seat and food. He could also smile and say, "Hello, sister-in-law," to the beautiful woman, and then turn back to discuss with Li Yi why the earth was a ball. Therefore, the topic just now must end here. Watching Li Xian leave with a few guards with a lonely face, Li Yi let out a long sigh. What he said just now was naturally nonsense. Based on Li Xian's character, he would not do something like kidnapping a good woman. He wanted to help Li Xian, but he could do nothing about this matter. Even a fool knew that the marriage of the royal family or the royal family was not so simple. Behind every marriage, if there was no political purpose, Li Yi would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. If he really helped Li Xian mess up this matter, Prince Ning would probably be the first to not let him go. Even though he had saved the princess and the emperor, he would not use this to gamble on where Prince Ning's bottom line was. In the eyes of these bigwigs, there was no eternal kindness, only eternal benefits. With his small arms and legs he could not resist Prince Ning's thick thigh. If he really provoked Prince Ning, he could only pack up his belongings and run away with Rui and the others. If Prince Ning went too far, he would ask Rui to secretly slit his neck in the dead of night, vent his anger, and continue to run away. Li Xian's figure had disappeared at the door of the shop. Li Yi looked in that direction for a long time, with a trace of helplessness on his face. "Sorry," the voice was so soft that only he could hear it. Chapter 211. The heavens were fair. Everyone gained something, but at the same time they would lose something else. As a member of the royal family, Li Xian didn't have to worry about food and clothing from the moment he was born. Every day he had a large group of servants by his side, respectfully calling him Little Prince and Little Prince. In this Qing and prefectural city, he could be said to have everything he wanted. If he was in a good mood, he could bring a large group of guards to tease women on the streets, visit brothels without paying, and even bully prostitutes every day. It wasn't a big problem to realize the dreams of the majority of his fellow men. In this era where the rule of man was greater than the rule of law, for a little prince, these weren't big things at all. However, because he was a little prince, there were many things that he couldn't decide himself. Disregarding other things, at least when it came to marriage, he who had advanced ideas was still like most people. He was bound by the orders of his parents and the words of the matchmaker. He didn't have any room to choose. In fact, he was even more pitiful than those people. Because his marriage was bound to be mixed with politics or other factors, it was destined to not be so simple. The two of them had known each other for a long time. Although Li Yi had almost completely integrated into this place and there was no barrier between him and Rui Xiaohuan, and Fang, speaking of true friends, the only one who could be said to be Li Xian, whose actions were also out of touch with this era. It was a pity that the things he was born with would one day become a burden on his shoulders. This was something that Li Yi couldn't change and couldn't change. Not everyone could live the life they wanted. These things could only wait for him to slowly adapt to. When his gaze moved from the door of the shop to the top of the wall, the young girl listening to the story had long disappeared. "Young master, it's cold outside. Do you want me to help you in?" It was winter. Even if the weather was good, there were only 2 hours in the afternoon when one could bask in the sun. After that, it gradually became colder. When Xiao Huan walked into the courtyard again, she felt a slight chill and walked over to speak to Li Yi. "There's no need to enter the house. Let's take a walk outside." After lying down for a long time, Li Yi really did not want to return to that bed. At this time, he also did not have the mood to tell the servant girl stories to relieve her boredom. He supported his body and slowly stood up from the chair. If he continued to stay in such a small courtyard, he would really die of boredom. "Son-in-law, you were injured yesterday, you can't go out." Xiao Huan hurriedly ran over to support him, wrinkled her nose and said. Li Yi waved his hand and didn't let her help him. After lying down for a while, he had regained some of his strength. It was not to the point where he needed help to walk. "I won't go far. I'll just take a stroll in the house next door." The wound on his leg didn't hurt his muscles or bones. As long as he didn't travel long distances, there wouldn't be any problems. At this moment he finally understood why there weren't as many otakus in ancient times as there were in modern times. Without mobile phones and computers, most people were illiterate and had nothing to do to pass the time. Those who stayed at home were bored to death. It was no wonder that the business of the brothels and taverns was so good. Those who had nothing to do would only drink and gamble, which were the few hobbies left. "Then I'll go ask Miss first." She didn't have the power to make a decision on this kind of matter. After saying this, the servant girl quickly ran away. Seeing her quickly run to find Rui, Li Yi sighed in his heart. This little girl was really hard to raise. He was the one who told her stories, and he was also the one who bought her clothes, jewelry and snacks. For such a small matter he actually had to report to Rui. "My husband's body is weak. Don't go far. Let Uncle Fong follow." Rui agreed in the end. The condition was that Fong was brought along. After experiencing what happened yesterday, she was also worried about letting Li Yi go out alone. Fong was very happy about this task. Going out with the son-in-law was much better than staying here to look after the shop. Moreover, he suffered a lot last night. Now he had to see him personally to be at ease. The entrance of Hua City was not far from Rui Square. It was Xiao Huan's first time to enter such a place. She was very curious about everything around her. In the sheds by the roadside, there were many people performing. For a moment she didn't know which one to see. Fong had been here before. In the past he didn't want to spend a few copper coins. Later he didn't lack money anymore. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, he specially went to another Hua City. Li Yi still chose the brothel that he had been to before. The place was spacious and comfortable. After entering the door, his expression was slightly stunned. In the brothel today, there were more customers than the previous 2 times. Although it was not a full house, the good seats were all occupied. Li Yi, Xiao Huan and Lao Fong could only choose a secluded seat. Just as they sat down, the young waiter ran over to them eagerly. "Sir, what would you like?" Asking each customer what they would like to order was actually a standard routine here. Although the tea was only sold for 2 copper coins per pot, if each customer could order a pot of tea, wouldn't it be a considerable income for the restaurant? Just as the waiter opened his mouth, he saw a young face and immediately said, "I know, a pot of tea, right? Please wait for a moment, the tea will be served soon. Come back." The waiter just turned his head and Li Yi waved his hand. "Do you have any other orders, sir?" The waiter hurriedly turned his head. 2 pots this time. Li Yi glanced at Fong. 1 pot of tea might not be enough for 2 people in Fong. This time, it wasn't the old storyteller on stage. Instead, it was a female singer who was singing. Her voice was quite pleasant to the ears, and there were a few female dancers behind her. Ever since old Fong entered the room, his eyes had never left the singer. If the stage wasn't too small and the audience was too small, it would really feel like a concert in the future. Li Yi suddenly had a strange idea. If he built a venue that could accommodate tens of thousands of people in this world and held a few concerts, what kind of scene would it be? Then, he felt that it was impossible to realize this idea. After all, there were no microphones or sound systems here. The venue was so big that even if the loudest singer shouted herself hoarse, she wouldn't be able to be heard by everyone in the venue. "Your tea." A clear and somewhat familiar female voice came from the opposite side. The girl who listened to his ghost story on the wall placed 2 pots of tea on the table and sat opposite Li Yi. Her eyes met with Xiao Huan's. The 2 people who were scared at the same time just now snorted and turned their heads away, no longer looking at each other. Chapter 212. That Ing Ning, you haven't finished. After sparking with Xiao Huan's gaze, the girl turned her head and said to Li Yi. She had already told Grandpa Sun the complete story of the painted skin. After listening to Ing Ning, Grandpa Sun had another story that others didn't know, which could attract many customers. Grandpa Sun only told the first half of the painted skin twice, but the number of customers in the brothel today was several times more than usual. Although most of them came to listen to the painted skin, they were in a good mood after seeing the song and dance and acrobatics. They didn't receive as much as Grandpa Sun, but they were all in the same brothel, so they received some positive effects. If she could receive so much money every day, she would be able to afford the hairpin that she had been yearning for a long time. Next time you want to listen to it, just climb the wall. Li Yi drank tea while watching the song and dance on the stage. In this kind of occasion and atmosphere, they should be eating melon seeds. Watermelons existed in this world, but he didn't know if they had the habit of eating melon seeds. The girl looked disappointed. Although she didn't like climbing the wall, she had to bear with it for the sake of the new story. After the song and dance ended and the girls picked up the money on the stage, Li Yi saw the old storyteller walk onto the stage again. At this moment, the atmosphere in the brothel suddenly became lively. Hurry up, hurry up. Don't talk nonsense. Tell me about the painted skin. If you try to fool me with next time again, don't blame me for being rude. Even Li Yi's expression was slightly startled when he saw the crowd urging him to hurry up. Was the painted skin so popular in this world? At this moment, the old man raised his hand and pressed down. The voices of the crowd immediately stopped. A few men who were still chatting without knowing what was going on were immediately stopped. The atmosphere in the brothel suddenly became quiet. From noise to silence, it only took a breath or two. Fang was still regretting that the young girl on the stage had been replaced by the old man. He was shocked by the sudden silence and asked subconsciously, "What's wrong?" Shua. Dozens of people turned their heads at the same time. This corner suddenly became the focus of everyone's attention. Under Fang's innocent expression, the old man had already begun to speak. Considering that there were new guests, the old man told the story from the beginning. The guests who had heard it before didn't show any impatience, but the expressions of those who heard it for the first time changed from puzzled to focused, and then to pale. Xiao Huan had already heard of painted skin. Although this old grandpa was scarier than the son-in-law when he talked about it, but she had already developed an immunity to it and would not run far away in fear. This old man is quite good at scaring people, Fang said in a low voice while listening. With his personality, he would not be scared by the old man. If a ghost really dared to scare him like this, he would most likely beat the ghost to death again. Having already memorized the entire story, the old man did not stop when he reached the place where he had left off last time. Instead he continued. Those who had been fooled by him twice immediately felt relieved. This time they could finally listen to the next part of the story. They threw a lot of money at him. It was raining copper coins on the stage. The wrinkles on the old man's face bloomed like flowers, and he became more attentive in telling the story. Looking at those people throwing money at him, Li Yi was astonished again. It was just telling a ghost story. How could it earn so much money? It seemed that in the other world, when Pu Songling wrote strange stories from a Chinese studio, he was still poor. But here, a storyteller's story had such an outstanding effect? It seemed that he had only exchanged a few pieces of osmanthus cake with a chapter of painted skin. It was a bit of a loss. He turned to look at the girl named Xiao Zhu. He didn't expect her to be so smart at such a young age. Feeling Li Yi's gaze on her, the girl cursed in her heart. After today's scene, if she wanted to hear more stories from him in the future, it would no longer be as simple as stealing a few pieces of osmanthus cake from Sister Ruoqing. The story of Ing Ning was only half told. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have asked Grandpa Sun to tell the story at this time. Looking at his expression, he probably regretted telling the story. Such a story could be sold at a high price in Hua City. Li Yi didn't regret it. The money that the old man got was not even as much as the profit from selling a bottle of Rui nectar. He was just curious about the entertainment in this world. These people watched the programs in the brothel, and when they were happy they would give tips. These tips were the main source of income for the ordinary actors and storytellers. The tips weren't much, and it was only enough for them to make ends meet. Compared to the stars in the future who could easily earn tens of millions of yuan by participating in a movie, a TV series, or a commercial performance, these seniors were living a miserable life. In any era, the entertainment industry should be relatively easy to make money. However, the entertainment industry in this world obviously had a lot of room for development. In layman's terms, there was still a lot of room for making money. As the weather gradually entered winter, the mosquitoes were almost frozen to death. Young ladies no longer needed it to drive away mosquitoes. In the cold weather, scholars didn't sleep easily either. The business of Rui nectar gradually cooled down. Sometimes only a few bottles were sold in a day. As for strong alcohol, although it was always in short supply, this thing was too wasteful of food and could not be brewed without restrictions. Most of the people in the Jing country were still hovering around the line of food and clothing and did not even have enough to eat. Even Ning Wangfu could not waste food without scruples. If they were targeted by the imperial censors and imperial censors, even Ning Wang would have a headache. Therefore, a few winemaking workshops had been closed recently. The production of Rui nectar was limited, and the supply of hard liquor was limited. Naturally, the daily income was greatly reduced. Of course, he had saved up a lot during this period of time, so he didn't lack money. However, things like buying a house in the prefecture city could only be postponed. As for the soap and perfume that were only for personal use, it was not suitable to be produced in this season. It was necessary to think of new ways to make money. At this moment he only had this thought. The most important thing now was to recover from his injuries. He once again focused his attention on the old man. The content of his story was slightly different from what he told the young lady. He had probably made some small changes to cater to the audience. It had to be said that this old man was indeed a professional. Even though Li Yi already knew the complete story, listening to the old man's story still made his hair stand on end. This time the old man didn't play tricks and honestly finished the story. The audience below the stage applauded. Naturally, there was no lack of rewards. When the old man retreated, it took him a lot of time to clean up the rewards on the ground. Li Yi was purely here to kill time. Xiao Huan and Fang accompanied him. The young lady stayed for a while and left. When Li Yi turned his head, he saw the old man walking over with the young lady following behind him. For today's matter, I still have to thank you, young master. These rewards should belong to young master. The old man placed a small cloth bag on the table and said with a smile. What do you mean? Li looked at him, puzzled. If it wasn't for the painted skin that young master told me, this old man wouldn't have received so many rewards. This money please don't refuse, young master. The old man explained. He told the story of the painted skin without prior consent from Li Yi. Although it was exchanged by Xiao Zhu with a few pieces of hanging flower cakes, he could only continue the story with peace of mind if Li Yi accepted the money. Yes, young master, please accept it. The young lady also said. In that case, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Li Yi nodded and took the bag. It was filled with heavy copper coins. Seeing that Li Yi accepted it, the old man relaxed. He hesitated and said, This old man has a presumptuous request. Chapter 213. An unreasonable request meant an unreasonable request. Since he knew the request was unreasonable, why would he bring it up? However, on account of Xiao Zhu and Osmantha's flower cake, Li Yi still smiled and said, Elder, please speak your mind. It's like this. Young master has also seen that those customers just now all came for painted skin. This old man wants to buy some similar novels from young master. Young master, rest assured the price will definitely satisfy young master. The old storyteller looked at him and said. Li Yi tilted his head and looked at the young girl standing beside the old man. She must have told this old man these things. When he first told her the story of painted skin, his intention was to tease her more. In the morning in the courtyard, it was because he was really bored and wanted to find someone to talk to. In essence, telling her the story was the same as telling the story to Xiao Huan. But this old man's meaning just now was to treat him as the kind of person who specialized in writing scripts, almost equivalent to the scriptwriters of the future. If it was a few months ago when he was still worrying about his family's lack of food, he might have agreed to this old man. After all, survival was always number one. But now, to sell strange stories from a Chinese studio for just a few copper coins, even if he didn't say it was unfair to himself, wouldn't it be unfair to Pu Songling? To refuse, he had to be more tactful. He looked at the old man and shook his head, saying, This painted skin is something I've heard of by chance. There really aren't any similar stories. The young girl raised her head and looked at him in disbelief. How could there not be any? Where was Legend of the White Snake, Journey to the West, a Chinese ghost story? Could it be that he had made all these up to deceive her? It didn't seem like it. Other than painted skin, there was also the half-finished Ing Ning. The old man's face showed a look of disappointment. He sighed and said, This old man has disturbed you. If young master has any good stories in the future, This old man will welcome them at any time. He had lived for so long, how could he not know that this young master's words did not match his heart? The girl called Xiao Zhu wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything and left with the old man. Fang and Xiao Huan watched the show with relish. Li Yi would occasionally ask Xiao Huan to give him some tips. Even though the show was a little boring for him, it was much better than lying in his room alone. In his heart, he thought that if he had time in the future he should change the entertainment business here. He had no other purpose but to relieve his boredom. Most of the customers in the brothel had indeed come for the old man's story. After listening to it, many people chose to leave. Li Yi stayed in the brothel for another hour before leaving with Xiao Huan and Fang. When they walked out, a woman walked out from the backstage. When her eyes inadvertently swept over the door, her expression was slightly startled. Sister Ruoqing, stop looking. They're gone. Xiao Zhu stretched out her hand and waved it in front of her eyes, then curled her lips and said, "What happened to him?" Wan Ruoqing muttered to herself as she recalled that when the figure was walking, there was a young girl supporting him. He's injured. Xiao Zhu continued, "In the future when you walk on the road, you must be careful of those vicious dogs that bite people." The girl was still mumbling something, but the pretty face of the woman beside her was a little absent-minded. After a moment, the girl stretched out her hand again and waved it in front of her eyes. "Sister Ruoqing, it's our turn." Walking out of the door of the brothel and then out of the tile-roofed house, they walked a few steps to reach Rui Lane. When Xiao Huan helped him walk in, Rui and Rui were both in the courtyard. "What is second miss doing?" Fang looked at Lu Rui in the courtyard with some puzzlement and asked, "Is she practicing martial arts? I've never seen this method before." Seeing this, Li Yi was curious. Previously, Lu Rui said that he was fighting randomly, saying that using softness to overcome hardness, and that there was no martial arts that could move 1,000 caddies with little effort. She advised him to return to the right path as soon as possible, and stop thinking about those unrealistic things all day long. At that time, when he asked her if she wanted to learn from him, Mississippi Lu very bluntly refused. But what was she doing now? Although her mouth said no, her body was still quite honest. Seeing that Li Yi had returned, Rui and Xiao Huan went to the kitchen to cook. Seeing that Li Yi was in no hurry to return to his room, he sat on a chair in the courtyard and looked at her. "Sai, you're not doing this. Experience the feeling of circle. Remember not to use force, relax a little, only then can you experience the essence of Tai Chi. Come closer, it's too far, I can't see clearly." In the past, it was always Lu Rui who guided him in his practice, and whenever he did something wrong she would violently correct him. Now that he finally had the chance to be in charge, Li Yi was never tired of correcting her movements. Lu Rui stopped, took a long sword from the side and pulled it out with a clang. "What are you doing?" Li Yi was shocked. He only corrected a few of her movements. Did she have to pull out the sword? One had to know that at that time, whether it was her words or her movements, they were much more violent than him. Didn't that old Taoist who passed by teach you Tai Chi sword? Lu Rui squinted at him and asked. "No, absolutely not." Although there was a Tai Chi sword tutorial in the library, Li Yi shook his head with a face full of certainty. She didn't want to learn Tai Chi sword, she obviously wanted to find a chance to torture him to vent her anger. Lu Rui glanced at her and put away her sword. Fang ran out of the shop, glanced at Lu Rui and ran to Li Yi's side and whispered, "Young master, Miss Wan is here." "Miss Wan?" Lu Rui's heart moved and he immediately looked over. Looking at Fang's guilty look, Li Yi felt depressed. If Miss Wan was here, then so be it. Why did he have to be so quiet? The two of them had a pure relationship and they didn't have any secret relationship, so why were they afraid of being seen by others? Hearing the footsteps behind him, Lu Rui looked back, and the moment he met the woman's eyes, a trace of amazement flashed through their eyes. "Greetings, madam." Wan Ruoqing walked to Lu Rui's side, smiled and bowed slightly. Although Li Yi had never put on airs in front of her, he was a county lieutenant after all, and his status was much higher than that of a lowly woman like her. She subconsciously regarded the woman in the yard as her wife, and bowed slightly. "Madam?" The expression on Li Yi's face was slightly stunned, and Lu Rui was stunned for a moment. She understood what Li Yi meant, and a trace of red appeared on her pretty face, and she glared at Li Yi fiercely. Li Yi was depressed by her glare and he couldn't blame himself for this. Mississippi Lu was too unreasonable. Thinking that she had never been reasonable, he sighed, stood up and said, "Miss Ruoqing, you have mistaken me for someone else. This is actually my wife's sister." "Ah, sorry." Wan Ruoqing was stunned for a moment, and then an awkward expression appeared on her face, and she hurriedly apologized. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Miss Ruoqing, what can I do for you?" The embarrassment on Wan Ruoqing's face had not faded. She paused and said, "Yuzhu said that you were injured. I came to have a look. It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal." Li Yi said with a smile. "It's good that you're fine. I'll go first." What happened just now made her blush. Seeing that Li Yi was fine, she was also relieved. She hurriedly put down the bamboo basket in her hand. "There's nothing good. These osmanthus cakes, just take it as a small gift from Ruoqing." Ah. Li Yi still wanted to say something, but after she put down the basket, she hurriedly turned around and left, and no matter how he called her, she would not look back. "I haven't brought the basket back yet?" Watching her figure disappear from his sight, Li Yi murmured in a low voice. Lu Rui walked out of the kitchen and looked outside the door in confusion. She walked to him and asked, "Husband, where's that girl? Maybe there's something urgent. I'll go first." Li Yi spread out his hands helplessly. Lu Rui nodded and did not dwell on this matter anymore. She looked at him and said, "Husband, come in with me." Li Yi thought that she had something to discuss with him, so he followed her into the room. Lu Rui waited for him to come in and then closed the door. Seeing her action, Li Yi was puzzled. It seemed that the thing to be discussed later was very important. "Husband, take off your clothes first." After Li Yi sat on the bed, his soft voice came to his ears. "Ah." Li Yi looked up at Lu Rui, who was walking towards him, and doubted his ears. Chapter 214. Take off my clothes? Li Yi was stunned and his mind went blank for a moment. Didn't they have something important to discuss? Was it necessary to take off his clothes to discuss something? A man and a woman were alone in a room. A woman closed the door and asked another man to take off his clothes. Anyone would think of something indescribable. This is not good. It was broad daylight and Rui and Xiaohuan were still outside. Couldn't they do it at night? Moreover, with Rui's character, how could she take the initiative? This surprised Li Yi and made him a little happy. Was his virginity of 2 lifetimes going to end today? "If you don't take off your clothes, how can I heal you?" Lu Rui looked at him and explained, "That palm hurt your lungs and it's not easy to heal. Using true qi to help you clear your meridians can help you recover faster." "I see." Li Yi looked a little disappointed. It turned out that it was just healing. He struggled for so long just now. If she asked for that, should he obey or obey, or obey? He had no choice but to obey. She was so good at martial arts and he was injured. He couldn't resist. He could only resist symbolically and then reluctantly. In the end, he was just thinking too much. He did not know that Jinqi could also heal injuries. It was no wonder that the experts in wuxia novels would feel like they were on the brink of death when they were slashed a few times or struck a few palms. It was as if they would die in the next moment, but they would immediately recover after a few days. It turned out that Jinqi could heal themselves, and the effect was thousands of times better than seeing a doctor or taking medicine. This was simply a life-saving bug that defied the natural order. The chances of becoming a martial arts master were already very slim. At the very least, he had to cultivate true qi. He did not ask for anything else. With the healing skills of a priest, his ability to protect himself immediately increased by a lot. Healing wounds was fine. Li Yi began to take off his clothes slowly. He wore a little more winter clothes and only had a thin shirt on his upper body. When he reached out to untie his belt, Lu Rui's voice came. "Husband." Li Yi looked up at her. "You don't need to take off your clothes." It was not like what was depicted in the TV series, where the two of them sat cross-legged on the bed, one in front of the other, naked, with the latter's hands pressed tightly against the former's back. Hot air rose from their bodies and red and blue lights flickered alternately. At this moment, the scene in the room was much gentler. Li closed his eyes and lay flat on the bed. He lifted his clothes and revealed the place where he had been hit by Wu Ying's palm. Compared to yesterday, the bruise had already faded a little. Rui's slender and fair palm covered his abdomen. Other than feeling that her hand was abnormally warm, Li Yi did not feel anything else. There was no such thing as a warm current. The television was full of lies. If he had to say what he felt, it would be comfortable, especially when the hand on his abdomen moved slowly. Li Yi opened his eyes and happened to meet her gaze. Time seemed to stop for a moment. Rui's hand paused slightly and an invisible layer of charming atmosphere spread out. "Cough, I'm a little thirsty." Li Yi coughed dryly, making the atmosphere slightly less awkward. "I'll go get some water." Lu Rui breathed a sigh of relief and quickly walked away. She opened the door and walked out. Looking at her slightly flustered footsteps, Li Yi's heart surged with an indescribable feeling. In his previous life he had been single for 20 years. Before he transmigrated, he was still worried about his mother forcing him to get married. In the end, in less than 2 days he got married to someone and had a wife. To be honest, when he was pressured by his mother, it was not that he had never thought of finding someone to marry and spend the rest of his life with. In his previous life, Li Yi was not considered a successful person, but he was not that bad either. The girl he had a crush on for a while got married and had children early. After he passed the age of 20, he did not feel that he had to marry anyone else in this life. He was satisfied as long as he could find someone and live a stable life. If he did not meet that psychopath Wu Ying, his current life was actually considered stable. He had a wife who could satisfy all men's fantasies, a sister-in-law who was unruly and willful but would not drop the ball at a critical moment, a silly and cute maid who did not have any ideals and liked to listen to stories, and he was surrounded by beauties. He lived an ancient life that many men dreamed of envied. The only strange thing was his relationship with Rui. They were husband and wife in name, but after spending time together, although the distance between them was constantly narrowing, they had never exceeded the state of friendship and love. In any case, compared to other people, his feelings for Rui were the most special. It was impossible to say that he loved her to death, but when he thought of the person who would accompany him for the rest of his life, the first person that appeared in his mind was still her figure. However, at least until now, the relationship between the two had not reached the point where they could do something more intimate. The revolution had not succeeded, and the comrade still had to work hard. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when Li Yi looked down, he found that the bruise on his abdomen was lighter, and the faint pain had lessened. It should be the effect of Rui's touch that woke him up. "Son-in-law, it's time to eat." Not long after he put on his clothes, Xiao Huan knocked on the door and came in. In the next few days, Rui would use her true qi to help him sort out his meridians. She seemed to have gotten used to it and did not stop like the first time. Of course, Li Yi was a normal man after all. Sometimes he could not control some of his body's normal reactions when she touched his lower abdomen. Every time this happened, the atmosphere would become awkward again. It was unknown what had happened to Rui recently, but the number of times she practiced martial arts was much more than before. Sometimes she would come over and ask Li Yi some questions about Tai Chi. Li Yi could only make it look like Tai Chi. How could he know anything deeper? He just casually threw out the words written in the book that sounded powerful, and it was enough for her to ponder over it for a whole day. As usual, he would go to the brothel to kill time. The old man would recite the painted skin over and over again, and anyone would get tired of it. The number of customers he could attract was decreasing, which was a good thing for Li Yi. It was quieter with fewer people. Every day after lunch he would order a cup of tea and sit there for about 2 hours. During this period the old man gave him money several times and mentioned that he wanted to buy some stories from Li Yi. After he did not get the answers he wanted, he did not speak again. If it was a coincidence, he could occasionally see Ruoqing singing on stage. Sometimes after she finished singing, she would come over and say a few words to Li Yi. She would take out her poems and let him comment on them. Li Yi had almost digested all the books about poetry in the library. It might be difficult for him to write a good poem, but he had accumulated a lot of knowledge and could give good suggestions most of the time. The girl named Xiao Zhu stood behind Ruoqing and looked at them. Sometimes she would look at them from head to toe and her eyes would roll around. She looked like a mischievous spirit. She did not understand poetry and she had never heard of Li Yi's name. She just felt that Sister Ruoqing's friend seemed to be a genius who knew a lot of stories. He was good at everything but he was too stingy. Chapter 215. Sister Ruoqing, the number of customers here has decreased again these past 2 days. After Li Yi left, the girl named Xiao Zhu looked at the sparse customers in the brothel and sighed. As the popularity of the painted skin gradually faded, the customers in the brothel decreased day by day. Now it was almost back to its usual level. According to their original estimations, it should have taken a little longer, but things did not develop as they had expected. In just one day the story of the painted skin had spread everywhere. Although they were indignant, they couldn't say anything about it. It was all a story. If Grandpa's son said it, others would naturally say it too. For a short story like this, after listening to it once, one could almost repeat it. It was impossible to rely on these stories to earn money for a long time. On one hand, the customers were taken away by other brothels. On the other hand, the story had been told too many times, so it naturally lost its novelty. There were fewer and fewer customers who had not heard of it, and there were no new stories to supplement it. Naturally, there would not be more people who were willing to come. Wan Ruoqing looked at her sisters who were performing seriously on the stage, but there were not many people watching. She sighed softly, and a trace of helplessness appeared on her face. They were just actors who lived at the bottom of the industry. They were not like those famous actors who depended on high officials and nobles. Every time they performed, they could get a lot of money. They could only survive in this way. Her situation was better. She had some fame in a small circle, and her singing was not bad. She and Xiaozhu did not live a comfortable life, but they could barely get by. However, such a life was not worth looking forward to. Perhaps once they were out of luck, the first thing they would face would be the problem of survival. "That Li seems to be very rich," the girl said in a low voice, holding her chin. The shop called Rui Feng, next door, was very famous in Qing'an Prefecture. It was said that many rich young masters and ladies liked to buy things there. He must not be short of money. It was a pity that Sister Ruoqing never accepted the help of those friends. Otherwise their lives would be much better. But speaking of which, Sister Ruoqing treated that young master differently from others. Could it be? The girl turned her head to look at her, and her face gradually showed a look of understanding, as if she had discovered something extraordinary. Wasn't the best ending for actors like them to marry such a young man? Although they could not become the official wife, even if they could be a concubine, if they could be treated well by him, it would be an excellent ending. Elder Sister Ruoqing was not only good at singing, she was also talented in poetry. Many scholars had expressed their interest in her, and there was one called Jianghu who had pursued her relentlessly. However, Elder Sister Ruoqing did not agree. Apparently, her heart belonged to someone else. That young master treats people very kindly, so he probably won't mistreat Elder Sister Ruoqing. However, she had to be careful of that girl who liked to play with her sword. When she climbed the wall, she saw her practicing her swordsmanship in the courtyard. Such a person was definitely not someone to be trifled with. If Elder Sister Ruoqing entered his house, she might bully her. That woman was very powerful. Even if she and Elder Sister Ruoqing joined forces, they might not be her match. In the girl's heart, she began to worry. "What are you thinking about?" Wan Ruoqing saw that the girl's expression kept changing. Sometimes she was happy and sometimes she was worried. She gently tapped her head and asked, "If Sister Ruoqing marries Li, I'm afraid she has to be careful of that." The girl subconsciously expressed her worries. Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by Wan Ruoqing. "Don't talk nonsense. Young Master Li has a family. There's nothing going on between us." "I know. There is nothing between a man and a woman." The girl curled her lips and said. He only knew how to use such an excuse to deceive her. If the two of them were innocent, why would he send them back in the middle of the night? Honestly speaking, she still felt that there was nothing wrong with Sister Ruoqing being with him. "Yuzhu, you're asking for a beating, aren't you?" Wan Ruoqing pretended to wave her hand. The girl hurriedly stood up from her seat, stuck out her tongue and said, "If Sister Ruoqing feels embarrassed, I can be your matchmaker. I think he likes Sister Ruoqing very much." "You still say?" Wan Ruoqing blushed and hurriedly chased after her. The girl screamed and immediately ran far away. The speed of County Magistrate Li's recovery is far beyond my expectation. When Dr. Chen of Huichun Hall came for a follow-up examination, he checked Li Yi's pulse and said with a look of amazement. It was reasonable to say that an ordinary person would need at least several months to recover from his last injury. Even a strong person would need a month to recover to his current level. At this time it was only 10 days since he was injured. This county lieutenant had the appearance of a frail scholar, but his recovery speed was truly amazing. Li Yi felt a chill in his heart when he saw the old man looking at him as if he was some kind of precious object. The old man might even be thinking of taking him away for research. After sending Dr. Chen away, he didn't continue to lie down. He strolled in the yard for a while and practiced Tai Chi twice to stretch his muscles and bones. These days, his range of activities was from here to the brothel. He ate more and moved less. He didn't know if he had gained a few kilograms. With his current physical condition, it was beneficial to do some proper exercise. Of course, it was only limited to walking and practicing Tai Chi. It was not suitable for him to do more vigorous exercises. Ru Yi brought Rui and Xiaohuan out. Regardless of ancient times or modern times, shopping was a woman's nature. It was the same for both young and old women. Especially when their families were not short of money, the prosperous Qing and prefecture was a heavenly existence for them. As the weather turned cold, Rui couldn't produce any more. Rui's workshop was temporarily closed. The girls returned to the stockade village. With Rui and Rui here, there was no need to worry about their safety. Fang also came here occasionally. After living in the prefecture for a long time, they were not used to the various inconveniences of living in the stockade village. Perhaps because it was boring to stay at home alone, Rui also moved out a few days ago and slept in the same room with Xiaohuan and Rui at night. Although this made the room a little crowded, the three girls used to live like this when they were young, so there was nothing strange about it. These few days he would still go to the brothel for a while every day. Sometimes he would sit in the yard with Rui and bask in the sun. He would watch Rui practice the Tai Chi swordsmanship that he had just taught her and correct her mistakes from time to time. When he first taught Tai Chi to Rui, she could do it more accurately than him after only watching it twice. Mississippi Lu might not be talented, so it was a good opportunity for Li Yi to satisfy his desire as a master. However, they were not here now. After Li Yi finished practicing 2 sets of fist techniques, he inadvertently glanced and saw a familiar head popping up on the opposite wall. The story of Ying Ning is not finished yet. The young girl leaned on the wall and watched him finish those strange movements. She looked over and said this. Li Yi hadn't seen her climb the wall for a few days. At this moment, there was someone to relieve his boredom. The story of Ying Ning was actually almost finished a few times and there were only a few parts left. Today the young girl was obviously a little absent-minded. She listened quietly and didn't ask questions from time to time like before. After the story was finished, the young girl sighed and said, "After tomorrow, if you want to watch dramas and listen to songs, go to another brothel." What? Li Yi asked with some doubts. Although there were many brothels in the neighboring houses, the environment where they were at was better. These days he had been going there every day. If he suddenly changed places, he wouldn't be used to it. Because there are too few customers. Grandpa's son and the others are all going to leave. The young girl sighed again and said slowly, "Customers were the foundation of their survival. If there were no customers, they couldn't even maintain the most basic survival. If they couldn't make money in one place, they naturally had to change places. Grandpa's son and the others actually had the intention to leave a long time ago. However, because of the story of painted skin last time, they still had a glimmer of hope in their hearts. However, the depression of the next few days made them completely disappointed. Even if she told him the story of Ying Ning, it would only be lively for a few days. Moreover, one or even a few stories couldn't feed so many people. If everyone left, she and Sister Ruoqing naturally couldn't stay here. They didn't know how they would live in the future. Leave? Don't. Li Yi saw that she didn't seem to be joking and hurriedly persuaded her. If they all left, where would he go to spend his time in the future? Chapter 216. Brothels were places where it was easy to gather and disperse. Many of those storytellers, singers and performers were entertainers who traveled across provinces and prefectures to roam Jianghu. If they could sustain a living in a place, they would be able to settle down for a long time. If they couldn't attract enough customers, they would naturally have to find another place to make a living. Even if they sang on stage in the same brothel, they might not meet again for the rest of their lives after a certain separation. Xiao Zhu and Wan Ruoqing were born in Qing and Prefecture. Although they wouldn't leave if they left this group, their future would only be more difficult. If we can't attract customers, then we have to think of a way. What if we go to the next place and there are still no customers? Li Yi shook his head. These people only knew how to escape when they encountered problems. If escaping could solve problems, they wouldn't be so miserable now. Then let's go to the next place. The girl leaned on the wall and looked at Li Yi as if it was a matter of course. Running around performing for a living was the current situation of this industry. The story was like a play. The more they performed in the same place, the fewer customers there would be. At this time, it was very necessary to go to a place where no one had heard or seen these things. Grandpa's son could tell the story of the painted skin for a few days every time he went to a place. When the people there were tired of hearing it, they would move on to the next place. It would be much better than staying there. No dreams, no goals, no customers. Can't you think of a way to attract customers? Li Yi was exasperated that the entertainment industry in this world was still at a very primitive stage. Just a little bit of novelty would be enough to attract these ancient people who had not seen much of the world. You think it's easy to attract customers? The girl rolled her eyes at him. Even if they could invite people, most of them wouldn't give them money. Sometimes they wouldn't even get a few copper coins in a day. You won't understand even if I tell you. Go, go, go. Call your sister Ruoqing over. It wasn't easy to communicate with this girl who wasn't very smart. Li waved his hand and said, "If you want to see big sister Ruoqing, just say it. Why are you looking for excuses?" He glanced at Li and climbed down the wall. "Sister Ruoqing, Li wants to see you." Wan Ruoqing was in her room thinking about how to continue living in the prefecture city with Yuzhu in the future when a young girl's shout came from outside the door. She didn't take the young girl's nonsense to heart, but she was afraid that he was looking for her for something, so she got up and walked out. Stage play? In the courtyard, Wan Ruoqing looked at Li with a puzzled expression. "What's a stage play?" "A stage play is... Forget it, that's not important." Li knew that there was no such thing as a stage play in this world, and it would be troublesome to explain it to her. He said, "You can think of it as the acrobatics that are often performed in the brothels, but it's different. There's no need to make up a song, and the language is straightforward and easy to understand. You just need to make some changes according to the story. I'll use painted skin as an example." Hearing his description, Wan Ruoqing's face gradually showed a look of realization. Unlike any other play, it tried its best to restore the content of the story. Although it was very different from the current mainstream, it was easier to do and worth a try. The young girl stood behind Wan Ruoqing. After hearing Li Yi's description and imagining it in her mind, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. She was already scared enough just listening to Grandpa Sun's story. If all the doors and windows were closed, the room would be pitch black. If she performed painted skin on stage, wouldn't it be scary to imagine the malicious ghost baring its fangs and brandishing its claws on stage? She hurriedly erased these images from her mind, rolled her eyes and said, "But we can't always perform painted skin. The customers will get tired of it after watching it too much." Li glanced at this little girl. She was so young yet so cunning. By saying this, wasn't she going back to the starting point and thinking about those stories? "I will provide you with the subsequent scripts and stories." After Li spoke, the young girl's face lit up, but then she heard him say, "As for the distribution of profits, we'll discuss it after they all agree." Originally, Li didn't intend to take out those stories, but if the old man and the others really left, the days in the future would probably be much more boring. Of course, the most important reason was because of Wan Ruoqing. From the young girl, he understood some of their current situation. After knowing her for so long, Li had a general understanding of her character. She looked weak, but she was actually very independent and strong-willed. If he openly helped her, she would most likely refuse. This kind of cooperation would probably not touch her pride. Wan Ruoqing looked at her, and a hint of gratitude appeared in the depths of her eyes. She said, if it wasn't for the fact that no one was willing to leave, they would definitely agree. The matter was urgent, so Wan Ruoqing and Xiao Zhu didn't stay for long. They had to discuss it with them first before they could give Li an answer. When the two of them walked out of the shop, three figures walked in from the opposite direction. "Miss, the son-in-law said that we're going to buy a big house in the prefectural city in the future. Are we not going back to the village?" Xiao Huan was holding some things she had just bought from the street as she spoke to Lu Rui. After living in the prefectural city for a few days, she finally understood what it meant to be lively and prosperous. She could see all kinds of people and it was very convenient to buy things. Every day she could accompany the son-in-law to the brothel to listen to music and watch dramas. It was much more interesting than the monotonous life in the village. "What? Don't you want to go back to the village?" Lu Rui looked at her and asked with a smile. Xiao Huan thought about it, then shook her head and said, "Wherever the young miss is, Xiao Huan will be there." No matter where it was, of course she would follow the young miss. However, if the son-in-law was in the prefectural city, the young miss would naturally be with him. As she spoke, she walked through the door. Two women walked out of the shop. The shop had temporarily stopped selling Rui necklaces, so naturally they could not be customers. Furthermore, the two women were not unfamiliar faces. One was the young girl who had scared her last time, and the other was the son-in-law's friend who she often saw in the brothel next door. Lu Rui raised her head and looked at the woman who was walking towards her. The other party seemed to be stunned for a moment, then nodded slightly to acknowledge her before leaving with the young girl. She remembered clearly that this woman had been to her house once. She seemed to be her husband's friend. A few simple thoughts flashed through her mind, but she quickly threw them to the back of her mind. On the other side, when she was walking back to the brothel with Ruoqing, the young girl looked back a few times and couldn't help but say, "That person just now seems to be Li's wife. She's so beautiful." Then, as if she had thought of something, she turned to look at Wan Ruoqing and added, "Of course, elder sister Ruoqing is also very beautiful. She's not much inferior to her. No, she's even more beautiful than Li's wife." Wan Ruoqing only smiled and didn't say anything. Although she was unwilling to compare herself to his wife, she had to admit that the two of them were really a perfect match. Chapter 217. Grandpa, are we really leaving? At the entrance of the brothel, a 15 or 16-year-old boy looked back at the empty brothel with a look of reluctance to leave. We're leaving. The storyteller, old man's son, sighed. Helplessness appeared on his wrinkled face, and his muddy eyes also showed some reluctance to part. He had traveled to countless places in his life, and he had experienced this kind of parting many times. But every time, it was a completely different feeling. Humans were not plants. It would be a lie to say that he had no feelings for this place, but it was more important to rely on this craft to survive. While he was not so old that he could not walk, he should save some money to settle down and find a new job for his child. When he left, he could close his eyes in peace. There were many figures in the brothel, and most of them were performers who were packing their things. The boy glanced at them again, then turned his head and carried the luggage on his back. These were his sisters and brothers who he had been with day and night. He would probably never have the chance to see them again. Let's go. The old man's voice was low. He did not look inside again and walked straight ahead. The boy followed closely behind him, turning his head every 3 steps. When he reached the other exit of the house, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Grandpa son, wait a moment. A clear and melodious female voice sounded. The boy turned his head and saw the panting young girl chasing after him. A look of surprise finally appeared on his face. Sister Xiaozhu. A moment later, the dozen or so performers, including old man's son, gathered in the brothel again, surrounding Wan Ruoqing and Xiaozhu. What, he is willing to provide us with stories and scripts. The wrinkles on old man's son's face twisted into a flower, and he no longer had the melancholy from before. It's not free, he also wants payment. Xiaozhu reminded him. Of course. The old man nodded repeatedly, but he was inwardly lamenting. He had begged that young master many times, but he had not gotten what he wanted. He raised his head and looked at Wan Ruoqing, thinking that Miss Wan was indeed capable. There was a saying that since ancient times, talented men had a weakness for beautiful women. That's all he said. Whether we stay or leave depends on everyone's opinion. Wan Ruoqing said with a smile. I'll stay. Me too. With a good story and script, of course we won't leave. The reason why everyone left was because they couldn't attract enough customers, and they had no choice but to make a living. If the modern world was stable, who would be willing to wander around? The future was unknown, and it was very likely that it would be even more difficult than it was now. In the current situation, they needed a good story and a good script, just like the painted skin from a few days ago. If there was an endless supply of such stories, they wouldn't have to worry about such things in the future. How much does that young master want? The old man turned to look at Wan and looked at Wan. In Hua City, good books were often fought over by many and were not cheap. In their current situation, they did not have to pay. Li Yi had just told her about this matter. He did not mention the exact amount, but rather he would be paid by taking a percentage of the profits. This method was more suitable for them who did not have much money. They immediately conveyed Li Yi's message to everyone. Very soon, Li Yi received a reply from the actors. He could take 40% of the profits. Miss Xiaozhu told him this when she was leaning on the wall. This number was more than Li Yi had expected. According to his original plan, 20% to 30% would be enough. This was just to help Wan Ruoqing. He did not expect to make money from this. In the future, when he went to the brothel, he should be able to see more interesting things. He had already told Ruoqing the idea of the stage play. As for the more detailed aspects, he believed that they were more professional than him, so he did not need to worry too much. He had nothing to do these few days, so he wrote a few short stories from Strange Tales from Liaozhai. The original stories were not long, so it did not take much effort. Although he could not make much money, it was still something. Many a little makes a mickle, and he would be able to get a place in the big house. The painted skin and Ying Ning were cheated by Miss Piglet with a few pieces of osmanthus cake. After writing a Chinese ghost story, she handed them to her from the wall. It was estimated that these would be enough to keep them busy for a while. Costumes, props, lines, and makeup all needed to be carefully prepared. Of course, there was also the background music that Li Yi had specifically reminded her about. A dry performance would be boring. Although many innate conditions could not be met due to the backward times, if she wanted to create a terrifying atmosphere, she could not do without background music. If she did not scare them to death, how could she let them pay for it happily? You look good. It seems that your body has recovered well. A voice came from behind. Li Yi turned his head and saw Li Emingzu, whom he had not seen for a while, standing in the yard. Li Xian, whom she had not seen for a few days, stood beside her. His face was still as haggard as the last time they met. It seemed that he had been tortured by premarital anxiety recently. Except for a small internal injury, I have almost recovered. Now, he was almost no different from ordinary people in other aspects, except that he could not do too much strenuous exercise. Since you have recovered, go back to the county government as soon as possible. Emingzi looked at him and said. The expression on Li Yi's face froze. Was he still a human? As the saying goes, it takes 100 days to recover when the muscles and bones are injured. He had suffered a more serious internal injury. It had only been half a month. Why should he go back to the county government? His face changed. He suddenly covered his chest with a painful expression on his face. No, I feel that my internal injury suddenly relapsed. Xiao Huan, help me back to my room to rest. All right. Don't pretend. Emingzu waved her hand and looked at him with disgust. When you feel that you have recovered, you can go to the county government. After he assigned all the affairs to his subordinates, the role of the county lieutenant was not so important. Father wanted to sharpen him in this position, but Emingzu, who knew him well, knew that even if he was not injured, he had all kinds of ways to be lazy. Her Highness's suggestion was very good. He had suffered a serious internal injury, and it would take about half a year to completely recover. He turned to look at Li Xian and asked, Why do you have time to come out today? Did the old man give you a holiday? Li Xian shook his head and said, No, I bet with him which of two stones of different sizes would fall to the ground first. Before he finished his words, Li Yi had already understood. After this bet, the old man might not have the mood to educate Li Xian anymore. The most likely thing to do was to find a corner to think about life. At the age of half a foot in the coffin, Li Xian had destroyed his worldview. He could only wish the old man well in his heart and hope that he could get through it. Chapter 218. Whether the old master, who had made the bet with Li Xian, had his worldview collapsed to the point of doubting life and leading to an early onset of dementia was not something that Li Yi needed to worry about. After the 2 hours of warmth in the morning, standing in the courtyard and being blown by the cold wind inevitably made his hands and feet cold. Returning to his room, he set up the heater and immediately felt much more comfortable. Li Xian sat by the heater with his eyes unfocused. He did not speak and looked like he was daydreaming. Li Yi often saw him like this. When he knew the law of free fall and that the ground under his feet was a big ball, he maintained this state for several days. Such a person was either a genius or a madman. No matter which one it was best not to disturb him when he was thinking. If a genius's train of thought was interrupted, he might fight you to the death. If a madman's train of thought was interrupted, he would definitely fight you to the death. Li Xian's mind was wandering, but the gaze of the person beside him had always been on him. Li Yi glanced at the bronze mirror in the room and did not find anything dirty on his face. He looked at Emingzu and asked, Why are you looking at me? Since entering the room, Li Yi found that she had been looking at him. Although it was inevitable that his vanity would be a little satisfied when being looked at by a noble beauty, this person's identity was too noble. She was a princess. If she looked at him for a long time and felt that the young man in front of her was really elegant, handsome, and talented, what would happen if she wanted to recruit him as her son-in-law? No matter which dynasty it was, being a son-in-law was not a good job. Not to mention that he could not have 3 or 4 wives, he had to be controlled by his wife everywhere. Normal men would not be willing to suffer like this. What's more, a violent woman like her would be unlucky to marry anyone. As his thoughts began to wander, he saw Emingzu stretch out her hand. She wanted to look, but she also wanted to touch. Rui and Xiao Huan were still at home. Li Yi's expression turned serious and was about to stop her when he suddenly saw her raise her wrist and grab his face. Are you kidding me? You want to destroy something you can't get? He had only asked, Why are you looking at me? Could it be that the old Li family, whose ancestral home was in the northeast, could trigger a fierce battle with a simple "What are you looking at?" Li Yi's heart skipped a beat, and his body instinctively made a defensive move. He grabbed her wrist with one hand and with a simple Tai Chi push he pushed her back. She resisted so easily, which meant that she didn't use any strength just now. While Li Yi was puzzled, Emingzi looked at him in surprise and asked, What kind of kung fu is this? The first time she saw Li Yi use this kind of kung fu, a seed of curiosity had been planted in her heart. Later, her wife used this kind of kung fu to force the nanny to retreat with one move. She had read all the martial arts books collected by the royal family, but she didn't remember this kind of kung fu. It seemed to be different from any sect in the martial arts world. This is called Tai Chi, how is it? Isn't it awesome? Only then did Li Yi realize that she wanted to learn Tai Chi. He looked at her and said, "If you want to learn, call me master and I can teach you." Since the chance of becoming a martial arts master was very slim, it was not bad to have a powerful disciple. Originally, Rui was the best candidate. However, after Li Yi mentioned it vaguely last time, she forced him to practice with her. The next day she almost couldn't get out of bed. After that, she never mentioned it again. It seemed that it was not bad to have a princess as a disciple. She had a noble status and was good at martial arts. She was pleasing to the eye, and she would be flattered by the royal family. It was a good thing to kill many birds with one stone. Emmingza didn't say anything, but her eyes showed her disgust. With her current level of martial arts cultivation, only a grandmaster could be her master. He glanced at Li Yi. Just based on his weak appearance, he felt that he was too poor to be accepted as a disciple. If she didn't want to bow, then so be it. He was too lazy to teach her. Li Yi curled his lips and thought, why haven't they left yet? Looking at the sky, it's almost time for dinner. Don't stay and eat for free later. There's no extra food at home today. Why hasn't Xiao Huan come in yet? It's time to serve tea and send the guests off. Ah, I know. There are 35 heads on the top, 94 legs on the bottom, 12 rabbits and 23 chickens. At this moment, Li Xian, who had been in a trance, suddenly had a glimmer of light in his eyes. He jumped up from the chair and laughed. Old man, you want to use this question to stump me? You must be dreaming. Li didn't know what the old man Li Xian was talking about would think if he heard those words. In any case, Li would be scared by him. Just as he was thinking about how to tactfully ask them to leave, Li Xian suddenly jumped up as if he was having a seizure. His hands and feet danced as he muttered something under his breath. He seemed to have gone mad and he almost kicked the heater on the floor. What's wrong? Hysteria? In shock, he immediately stood up. If the crown prince became hysterical and became silly in the future, would Prince Ning chop him up to make dumplings? Even Emingzu was shocked. She also thought that Li Xian suddenly had a hysteria and pinched his philtrum. Ouch. Let go. Li Xian finally stopped having a seizure. He covered the part above his lips that was red from Mingzhu's pinch and breathed heavily. Li Yi and Emingzu looked at each other and felt relieved. What's wrong? Have you thought of a way to reject the marriage? Li looked at him and asked. Seeing how excited he was just now, Li really couldn't think of anything that could make him so happy. No, let's not talk about this first. Li Xian waved his hand and looked at Li Yi. He asked expectantly, you are the #1 scholar in the Jing kingdom. How about I give you a question? Nothing much. As long as Li Xian didn't have a hysteria in front of him, it was fine. As for answering questions, it was almost time for dinner. Who had the free time? As for the #1 scholar in the Jing kingdom, he had the title of a scholar and didn't give any money. Whoever wanted to be the scholar could be the one. The expectant expression on Li Xian's face froze. There was no way to continue this conversation. Are you afraid? Li Xian looked at him and asked. Yes, I'm afraid. It was child's play to provoke Li Yi. I bet 10 taels of silver. No way, 100 taels? Deal? After a series of twists and turns under the witness of the princess, the two of them quickly reached a friendly wager. They bet on whether or not Li Yi could answer Li Xian's question. The wager was 100 taels of silver, and the agreed time was 30 minutes. After clapping their hands to seal the vow, Li Xian looked at Li Yi with a proud face. This problem was given to him by the old man yesterday. He had spent a whole day trying to figure out the crux of the problem. 100 taels of silver was nothing to him. It was enough to make Li Yi suffer and feel the taste of racking his brains. He was already satisfied. He had been tortured by him so many times in the past. Today was the day to take revenge and wipe away the humiliation. After making a comparison on the IQ level, Li Yi felt that the question Li Xian mentioned should not be difficult for him. Just now, he vaguely heard him say something about heads, legs and chickens and rabbits. Could it be the problem of chickens and rabbits living in the same cage? Today there are rabbits living in the same cage. There are 35 heads and 94 legs. How many rabbits are there? Li Xian crossed his arms and looked proud as if he had won. You have 30 minutes to think about it. Li Emingzu raised her eyebrows. She had heard of this mathematics question before and knew the answer. However, the specific method of solving the question was not recorded in the book. It must have been lost in the process of being passed down. Even the Imperial Library did not have any record of it. The possibility of it existing among the common people was even smaller. Li Yi sighed. If it was so easy to make money every time, why would he spend so much effort to study perfume and soap? If there was a chance in the future, he would get to know more princes and take the initiative to send a lot of money to him. What a wonderful life. There is no need for 30 minutes. As soon as Li Xian's voice fell, Li Yi looked at him and said, 12 rabbits, 23 chickens, is this answer correct? The proud expression on Li Xian's face froze again. Chapter 219. You must have heard the answer I just said, or you have seen this question before. Li Xian was stunned for a moment, and then he said with certainty. If Li Yi gave the answer after the time it took to burn a stick of incense, he would also feel surprised, but it was within his tolerance. After all, in his eyes, even if Li Yi was not the smartest person in the Jing kingdom, he was not far from it. However, Li Yi could give the correct answer as soon as he said the question. He was not a human but a demon. This time Li Xian really guessed wrong. Just now he suddenly jumped up, which scared Li Yi. He was not in the mood to listen to what this guy said. Although he had seen a similar question before, the answer would be different if the number was changed. There was no second possibility. In the future, as long as a primary school student had learned Olympiad mathematics, he or she would be able to say the answer without cheating. Using such a difficult question to test him, wasn't it asking to be humiliated? If you want to renege on your debt, just say it. Why do you need to find such an excuse? Li Yi said disdainfully, curling his lips and looking at him. Li Xian's handsome face turned red. As a dignified prince, it was not good to say that he reneged on his debt. However, he was more eager to know how Li Yi got the answer. As long as you tell me how you solved this question, I will give you another 100 taels in addition to the 100 taels we agreed on. Money was just a number to Li Xian. He was more interested in the novel methods that Li Yi used every time. Even Li Mingzhu's gaze landed on Li Yi. She also knew how to solve this question, but she did not know the reason. If she tried it one by one, she would naturally be able to find out the answer after spending some time. However, for him to be able to solve it so quickly, either he knew the answer beforehand, or he used a method that they had never seen before. To Li Xian, money was just a number, but to Li Yi it wasn't. It was like a brick, a tile, or a room in a large mansion. You just said, there are 35 heads and 94 legs? His words indicated that he agreed with Li Xian's action of giving money. Li Xian nodded repeatedly. Let's assume, just assume. Li Yi stretched out his hand and gestured. Let's assume that these chickens and rabbits are well trained. Li Xian was confused. Solving a question was solving a question. What did it have to do with these chickens and rabbits being well trained? However, since Li Yi had always taken the unusual path, he felt that he should listen to him first. Mingzu frowned when she heard that, but she quickly relaxed. Obviously, she had the same idea as Li Xian. If these chickens and rabbits are very obedient, they will raise one leg when I clap my hands. How can there be such a solution? Li Xian could not bear to listen anymore. How could there be such obedient chickens and rabbits? If such a bizarre method could work, then he might as well let those chickens and rabbits speak the human language and tell them the number of their own kind. Li Yi glared at him. Do you still want to know the solution? If you continue to talk nonsense like this, the money will be gone. Although Li Xian was stupid, he was not that stupid. Continue. Mingzu seemed to understand something. She urged him with a strange look in her eyes. Li Yi looked at Li Xian with a complicated look. Li Xian understood what he meant. He was laughing at himself for being inferior to Mingzu. However, Mingzu had been intelligent since she was young. When she was young and was taught by a teacher in the palace, Li Xian discovered this. Although this was an indisputable fact, why did he feel so upset in his heart? When you clap your hands once, a total of 35 legs are raised. When you clap your hands twice, a total of 70 legs are raised. At this moment, all the chickens are sitting in the cages. There are no legs to count. Each rabbit is left with 2 legs. There are 24 legs left in the cages. The number of rabbits is 12 and the chickens is 23. As Li Yi spoke slowly, Mingzhu's eyes shone brightly. Li Xian was stunned. At this moment, perhaps only the words, 10,000 horses galloping could describe his true feelings. How could this be possible? The problem that had been bothering him for a whole day could be solved with just 2 claps of his hands? That was not what the old man said yesterday. He said that this was a problem passed down from ancient times. Even if he could not solve it, it did not matter. Because the headmaster only knew the answer, but did not know the specific solution. He looked back at Li Yi. He was indeed a demon. Li Yi saw Li Xian's expression, but he was not surprised. There were no Arabic numerals or quadratic equations in this world. Mathematics could only be called arithmetic at best. It was still in the stage of ignorance. Only in a few hundred years would there be a great mathematician who was an astronomer or a Taoist priest. After all, the imperial examinations did not test these things. Mathematics was not highly valued. It was not unusual for a doctor of mathematics from the Imperial Academy to be stumped by a problem of chickens and rabbits in the same cage. The method he used just now was called leg-raising method. It was not a joke on the internet in the future. In the ancient classic of arithmetic, Sun Tzu's arithmetical classic, this was indeed how to solve this problem. From the reactions of Li Xian and Mingzu, it could be inferred that Sun Tzu's arithmetical classic either did not exist in this world, or it had been too long and this method of solving problems had been lost. There is actually such a method of solving problems. It is really incredible. Li Xian could not help but exclaim. He was actually not that interested in mathematics. He only wanted to solve this problem and impress the headmaster who taught him. After thinking for a whole day, he finally managed to figure out the correct answer in his mind. Using Li Yi's unconventional method, it only took him 2 breaths of time. Unbelievable, isn't it? That's fine, we can try another method. Li Yi was quite generous. At the very least, he wanted to make Li Xian feel that the loss of 200 silver taels was worth it. There is actually another method? Li Xian exclaimed and moved his head closer. First, you need to remember a new method of counting. Mingzu and Li Xian watched as Li Yi used a brush to write and draw on the Xian paper. Those strange and simple patterns were something they had never seen before. When put together, it turned out to be a new method of counting. Both of them had received aristocratic education and had a deep foundation. Although this method looked novel, it was not difficult to understand. After a simple explanation from Li Yi, they spent a little time digesting this set of rules. In their hearts they were amazed. This method was undoubtedly much better than the current method of counting in the Jing kingdom. It was much more convenient and simple. This is called the equal sign, this is the plus sign, this is the minus sign, and this is the cross. You can understand it as the number that we don't know yet. Li Yi did not think too much at first. When he started to explain, he realized that it was not much easier to teach them this knowledge than to teach 2 children who had just entered elementary school. However, since he had already said it, he naturally could not give up halfway. He could only be patient and push forward bit by bit. After an hour. Just like this, solve the 2 unknown numbers, and you will get the number of the chicken and the number of the rabbit. Li Yi let out a long sigh of relief. He had finally taught them from the beginning to the end, and he felt a little exhausted. It was so easy to teach naughty children. He could just make up a story to fool them. If Li Xian asked this kind of question again in the future, he would not do it unless he paid more. Do you understand? He looked at the 2 of them and asked expectantly. Although the process was a little complicated, if they understood it, it would be a little comforting. No, Li Xian said without the slightest bit of hesitation. Li Mingzu was also puzzled. 2 pieces of rotten wood. Li Yi sighed in his heart. Xiao Huan, send the guests out. Looking at the little servant girl who had walked to the door, Li Yi said decisively. Young master, it's time to eat. The little servant girl stood at the door and said weakly. No rush, no rush. Eat first. After eating, you can explain it to me a few more times and I should understand. Li Xian patted his shoulder and stood up. He looked at the little servant girl with a smile and asked, Miss Xiao Huan, where do you want to eat? Chapter 220. The nobles of the royal family, the princes and princesses, when freeloading, there was no self-restraint and etiquette to speak of. Because there were guests, as the in-laws Rui and Xiao Huan were eating in another room. Li Xian looked at the bubbling hot pot on the stove and was very curious. He had never tried this kind of eating method. He did not stand on ceremony with Li Yi, scooped up a piece of mutton and stuffed it into his mouth. He was so hot that he breathed like a dog, but he was reluctant to spit it out. His face was red and it took him a while to recover. Mingzu was like him, a piece of tofu was already in her chopsticks. Seeing Li Xian's appearance, she let it cool for a while before eating slowly. Li Yi was a little distressed. In the early winter weather, fresh vegetables were extremely difficult to find. Even if there was, the price was relatively high. And because it was stored in the cellar, the taste and nutrition could not be compared to fresh vegetables. Therefore, the weekly hot pot was mainly mushrooms accompanied by tofu, carrots, meat and very few cabbage and vegetables. Unfortunately, this time, Li Xian and the others happened to come. After swallowing it with great difficulty the first time, his stomach burned. Li Xian learned his lesson the second time. He first placed the food he scooped up into a bowl and waited for it to cool. Then he looked at Li Yi with satisfaction and said, "This is the first time I've tried eating this way. Tomorrow I'll have the chef from the Wang estate come over and learn. I'm sick of eating that stuff all day." This method of scooping food directly from the pot was very suitable for this cold weather. After eating delicacies for so many years, one would be tired of it. It was good to change the taste occasionally. Li Xian, who had freeloaded at Rui restaurant many times, felt that the food cooked by Li Yi was more to his taste than the food in the Wang mansion. He really did not know whether the imperial chefs that Uncle Huang rewarded to the Wang mansion were real. If Li Yi went to the Wang mansion to be a chef, eating every day would be something to be happy about. Li Yi didn't know that the guy in front of him was already thinking about poaching him. He was busy scooping out some of his favorite dishes. If he was a little slower, he wouldn't be able to eat anymore. Halfway through the meal, Mingzu caught a glimpse of a wine jar on the bedside cabinet. Her eyes lit up and she stood up. Before Li Yi could remind her, she had already opened the jar and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Li Yi helplessly rubbed the space between his eyebrows. That was the alcohol he used to disinfect his wounds, and its concentration was more than 70%. Mingzu Li put down the wine jar and her face flushed red. "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep for a while." After that, she lay down on Li Yi's bed and no longer made a sound. When did Mingzhu's alcohol tolerance become so bad? Li Xian murmured doubtfully. Then he waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about her. Since we're free, let's talk about that binary quadratic equation system." Li Yi felt that he had almost forgotten everything that he had just said. He didn't even understand binary quadratic equation. He probably wouldn't have the ability to solve binary quadratic equation in this lifetime. After 2 hours, Li Xian finally left with satisfaction. Although there were some things that he hadn't figured out yet, it was only a matter of time. Today's trip had been rewarding. Both his body and mind had been greatly satisfied. Mingzu Li also left. She was carried away by the old woman that he saw last time. When the old woman carried her up from the bed, she even looked at Li Yi suspiciously, as if he had done something improper to the princess. This made Li Yi rather depressed. He could do it to anyone but not to her. If he accidentally hurt his hand, it would be too late to cry. After the two finished eating, they wiped their mouths clean and left, leaving behind a mess. Xiao Huan had to clean it up. The young prince kept his promise and moved quickly. In less than 2 hours, a guard had delivered 200 taels of silver to him. He asked Xiao Huan to send the silver directly to Rui. The key to the small treasury was kept by Rui. Li Yi usually only cared about earning and not spending. When he needed money, he only needed to let her know. No matter how much Li Yi needed, she never asked where the silver went. After eating, it was not appropriate to lie down immediately. He went to the courtyard to digest the food and guide Rui. With Li Xian's intelligence, it was impossible for him to figure out Arabic numerals and quadratic equations in such a short time. He should not bother him for the next 2 days. At this time in King Ning's mansion, Li Xian, who had just returned to the mansion, looked at an old man in front of him with concern. He asked, "Is Teacher Wu feeling better?" Opposite Li Xian, the old man with white hair and beard stroked his beard and said, "Thank you for your concern, Crown Prince. I am fine." Then the old man sighed and said with great sorrow, "I never thought that the big and small stones would fall at the same time. I have been wrong all my life. Teacher, do not worry. Humans are not saints. We cannot know all the truths of the world." Li Xian comforted him. "Moreover, the world is so big. There are many things that we have not thought of, such as, Crown Prince's words are reasonable. Even saints cannot avoid mistakes, not to mention us mortals." He did not expect the Crown Prince to say such things. The old man was very pleased. It seemed that the Crown Prince had improved a lot under his guidance. He would be able to answer to the prince in the future. He asked with a smile, "Like what?" Li Xian smiled slightly. "For example, teacher thought I was going to give an example." Looking at Teacher Wu's dull expression, Li Xian felt very happy. The trick he learned from Li Yi was really practical. The old man could not stand Li Xian's sudden change. After a short moment of shock, Teacher Wu's old face showed some embarrassment. He said, "Since the Crown Prince is back, let's start today's lesson early." The old man had obviously recovered from the shock of the morning and was dutifully finishing the lesson that he had missed. Li Xian was not interested in the old man's lesson about calendars and astronomy. It was not only because it was boring, but also because there was an important reason. What Teacher Wu said was very different from what he had learned from Li Yi. He looked at the old man and said, "I still have one thing that I do not understand. I hope teacher can explain it." "Crown Prince, please speak." Teacher Wu was even more pleased. It was a good thing that there was a question. It meant that the Crown Prince had listened to what he had taught. Teacher once said that the sky is like a hat and the earth is like a chessboard. Does this mean that the sky is round and the earth is square? The old man nodded and said, "The sky is like a dome and the earth is like a chessboard. It means that we should complement each other. This is also the core of the yin-yang theory of Taoism." The old man had a deep understanding of Taoism all his life. The saying that the sky is round and the earth is square was the embodiment of the yin-yang theory. Naturally, he would not doubt it. "I wonder if teacher has ever seen a sail on the sea?" Li suddenly asked. The old man did not know why the Crown Prince would ask such a question, but he still nodded and said, "When I was young, I traveled the 4 seas. Of course I have seen it." "Then I wonder if teacher still remembers what part of a sail you first see when it comes from the sea?" Li Xian asked again with a smile. "The mast, of course," the old man said without hesitation. At this moment he was even more curious. What was the Crown Prince trying to ask? Li Xian smiled and said, "If the earth is as flat as a chessboard, shouldn't you see the whole ship? Why do you see the mast first?" "Unless the earth under our feet is round." Li Xian stretched out his palm and made an arc. "This." The old man was shocked and wanted to argue. However, when he opened his mouth, he realized that he could not provide any evidence. "Absurd, this is simply absurd." The elder's face darkened. This was something passed down from his ancestors, so he naturally would not believe that the knowledge of the past few decades was wrong. If the Crown Prince's words were to spread, he was afraid that he would become a laughing stock and lose face for the royal family. Li Xian's expression became somewhat displeased. He was trying to reason with the other party, yet the old man didn't answer him directly and kept saying that he was babbling nonsense and pestering him endlessly. This was Li Xian's fault. If teacher still has doubts about this, I can give you a few more examples. Teacher Wu's heart had already begun to waver. When he heard what Li Xian said next for the first time, he doubted what he had learned all these years. His body trembled and his face became paler. He no longer cared about his status and shouted, "Shut up!" If he allowed Teacher Wu to continue, the faith he had built all these years would collapse. Chapter 221. Teacher, there's still something I don't understand." Seeing Teacher Wu leave in a panic with a pale face, Li Xian hurriedly chased after him. "Teacher, don't go. We haven't finished today's homework." Hearing the footsteps behind him, the old man's heart skipped a beat. His old arms and legs, which were usually not very agile, suddenly exploded with infinite potential. In the blink of an eye, Li Xian could no longer see Teacher Wu's figure. Li was right. Humans have infinite potential. His Royal Highness stood where he was. He thought of Teacher Wu's wind-like figure and murmured, "Tomorrow, it should be Teacher Chen's turn, right?" That day, the servants in the prince's mansion saw a scene that shocked them to the core. Teacher Wu, who was over 60 years old, was running quickly in the prince's mansion. He went straight to the prince's study. A few young and strong servants could not catch up with him. After a while, Teacher Wu was stopped by an old servant at the door of Prince Ning's study. "Teacher, why are you in such a hurry?" The old servant asked with a puzzled expression. I want to see the prince," Teacher Wu said while panting. After running for so long he was a little out of breath. The old servant saw Teacher Wu's anxious and hurried expression. He was afraid that something important had happened, so he said, "Teacher Wu, please wait here for a moment. I will go and inform the prince." Teacher Wu nodded when he heard this. He could use this time to catch his breath. Not long after, the old servant walked out of the study and said, "Teacher Wu, the prince wants to see you." Although Teacher Wu was much older than Prince Ning, there was an order of seniority. He straightened his clothes and walked in unhurriedly. At the desk on the right side of the study, Prince Ning put down the book in his hand and stood up. He asked with a smile, "Teacher Wu, why are you looking for I? Did Xian Air offend Teacher Wu?" "That is not the case." The prince misunderstood. Teacher Wu waved his hand and said, "His Royal Highness is talented and intelligent. I have nothing more to teach him." This time I came to ask for your resignation. Resign? Prince Ning frowned and asked, Headmaster, why do you say that? If Xian is naughty and mischievous and offends you, please don't take it to heart. I will reprimand him, but don't mention the resignation again. Although this teacher Wu had retired, his knowledge was not inferior to those great scholars in the court. Prince Ning had invited him to teach Li Xian, which was a great affirmation of his ability. He was extremely knowledgeable and experienced, so how could he not have anything to teach? This was no longer humility, it was mockery. Could it be that little Xian had really offended Teacher Wu? Teacher Wu smiled bitterly and said, Your Royal Highness has misunderstood. The Crown Prince is gifted and intelligent, which is rare in this world. It is my good fortune to be recognized by your Royal Highness to teach the Crown Prince. However, this old man is old and unable to do as I wish. I hope your Royal Highness will agree to my resignation. Teacher Wu's words were half true and half false. His resignation was true, but his inability to do as he wished was a lie. The real reason he left was to preserve his reputation in his old age. If he heard the Crown Prince's shocking words again, he would not close his eyes when he passed away. His Highness the Crown Prince's words had a huge impact on him. If it was just nonsense, it would be fine. He was confident that he could persuade the Crown Prince to walk the right path. But the scary thing was that after thinking about it carefully, he actually faintly felt that the Crown Prince's words made sense. This was really embarrassing. He had spent his entire life to build up his understanding of this world, but because of a few words from the Crown Prince, he was on the verge of collapse. He did not dare to teach the Crown Prince anymore. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would die with everlasting regret. Prince Ning stared at Teacher Wu with a pair of tiger eyes. There was no dissatisfaction or mockery on his face. Could it be that what he said just now was all from the bottom of his heart? Teacher Wu was determined and had made up his mind to leave. No matter how Prince Ning tried to persuade him to stay, it was useless. In the end, Prince Ning agreed. At that moment, his heart was full of doubts. After Teacher Wu left, he called out to the door, Go and find little Xian. I will go now, the old servant outside the door responded and left in a hurry. Not long after, Li Xian knocked on the door of the study and walked in. He asked, Father, why are you looking for me? Prince Ning looked at him coldly. What did you do to Teacher Wu? He just came to ask for my resignation. He has already left the king's mansion. Teacher Wu resigned? Li Xian's face was full of shock and joy. This is really too. He looked up and saw his father looking at him. His tone changed. This is really a pity. Teacher Wu is very knowledgeable and little Xian admires him. I didn't expect him to care so much about right and wrong that he resigned in shame. If I had known, I would not have pointed out his mistakes in front of him. Prince Ning's eyebrows twitched. They had been together for almost 20 years. How could he not know what Li Xian was capable of? Pointing out Teacher Wu's mistakes and making him resign in shame? Even in a few decades, Li Xian might not have the ability to do so. He did not want to pursue the matter. He waved his hand and said, Go, go. Teacher Wu has left. You must humbly seek guidance from Teacher Chen and Teacher Zhao. Do not cause trouble like this again. I understand. Li Xian agreed readily and left the study. He looked at the old servant and asked, Teacher Wu really left? The old servant nodded. Teacher Wu and the king were talking in the room just now. They did not purposely lower their voices, so he heard everything from the door. Go to the accountant's office and withdraw 100 taels of silver. Send it to Teacher Wu, Li Xian casually ordered and walked forward. Although he was kind enough to help Teacher Wu better understand the world, he did not consider the old man's age. It would not be easy for him to accept it. He should use a gentler method. Otherwise, Teacher Wu would not have resigned and left the king's mansion. He was knowledgeable and knew everything. It would be a pity if he left just like that. Watching Li Xian's leisurely departing figure, the old servant sighed. Although the king's mansion was not short of silver, it could not withstand His Royal Highness's extravagance every time. Did His Royal Highness solve the question from 2 days ago? The old man with a square face and white hair asked Li Xian with his hands behind his back. Yes, I did, Li Xian said with a nod. How did His Royal Highness solve it? The old man asked again. He was just asking casually. This question could be solved with some time. However, there was no other way to solve it. He did not have high hopes for His Royal Highness. Leg raising method 2 element 2 2 element 1. Quadratic equation method. Li Xian said with a smile. The old man's expression froze. Leg-raising method, what formula? Li Xian took a pen and paper from the side and began to write. Leg-raising method, it's like this. 2 hours later the paper was densely packed. He turned to look at the old man and asked, Teacher Chin, are these two methods correct? Teacher Chin nodded mechanically. Until now he was still confused about the Arabic numerals, counting methods, equations, and unknown numbers that Li Xian had just introduced. He could not tell right from wrong. However, although he had never seen these things before, the answers were correct. Presumably the process would not be wrong. However, where did His Royal Highness learn about these strange symbols and methods? He had studied mathematics all his life and had never heard of such a wonderful method. I still have a few questions that I hope teacher can answer. For some unknown reason, when Teacher Chin saw the Crown Prince looking at him with a smile on his face, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Today there is 1 rooster worth 5 coins, 1 hen worth 3 coins, and 3 chicks worth 1 coin. Today I bought 100 chickens with free money. Ask the old rooster, the hen, and the chicks. The wall is 5 feet thick. 2 mice pass through it. The big mouse passes 1 foot a day and the small mouse also passes 1 foot. The big mouse passes twice a day, and the small mouse passes half a day. When will they meet and how much do they pass through? Li Xian said lightly. He threw out the difficult questions that he had gotten from Li Yi yesterday. Teacher Chin was dumbstruck. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Cough, I'm not feeling well today. My lessons will be postponed. Your Royal Highness can arrange it yourself. A moment later, Teacher Chin wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. He got up and left in a hurry after throwing down these words. The depression that had accumulated over the past few days was swept away. Li Xian's face was glowing. He walked like a dragon or a tiger, high-spirited and vigorous. Along the way, the servant girls of the prince's residence avoided him. What was wrong with His Royal Highness today? Why was he smiling so indescribably? Chapter 222. What? Teacher Chin is also going to resign? In the study, Prince Ning frowned slightly. He looked at the white-haired old man in front of him and repeated what he had just said. The old man sat on the chair and cupped his hands together as he said, His Royal Highness is being taught by an expert. I can no longer teach him anything in the way of mathematics. After talking with His Royal Highness in the morning, he had pretended that he was not feeling well and said that he would postpone his lessons. In fact, when he returned home he had not slept at all. He had meticulously organized the contents of what His Royal Highness had said. The Arabic numerals and the symbols for addition and subtraction were easy to write and could be used to calculate. It was much more convenient than the current methods. If it could be implemented, the field of mathematics would definitely be greatly developed. As for the equations, the level of design was even more mysterious. Teacher Chin had studied mathematics for decades, so he could naturally see that it was extraordinary. What he had learned from His Royal Highness was probably just the tip of the iceberg. As for the last question that His Royal Highness had consulted him, he had thought hard all night but could not solve it. Or perhaps he had tried to find an answer, but there was no convincing method. Of course, he did not think that His Royal Highness had suddenly been enlightened and happened to show such amazing talent in mathematics that even an old man like him, who had studied this field for decades, would feel ashamed. The only explanation was that His Royal Highness was being taught by an expert. As for how powerful this expert was, it was at least to the extent that he had to look up to him. He thought about how Mr. Wu had left in a hurry 2 days ago without even informing them. After 2 days of curiosity, Mr. Chen figured out the reason for Mr. Wu's resignation. He was afraid that Teacher Wu had encountered the same situation as him. With such an expert behind His Royal Highness, it was naturally better for him to resign early. Expert? When Prince Ning heard this, his face showed some surprise. These days, His Royal Highness had been in the prince's residence, receiving guidance from the 3 teachers. Aside from them, who else could it be? Could it be Teacher Zhao? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a servant came to report that Teacher Zhao had asked to see him. Prince Ning was stunned for a moment as if he had thought of something. He had not seen Teacher Zhao, but he had more or less understood what Teacher Zhao wanted to say. This old man has specially come to ask for your highness' resignation. Teacher Zhao did not take a seat. After exchanging glances with Teacher Chen, Teacher Zhao went straight to the point. Both Teacher Wu and Teacher Chen had resigned for some unknown reason, leaving Teacher Zhao alone. Naturally, he felt uneasy. After the two of them left, he would be next. Rather than being forced to do so, it would be better for him to leave early. At least he could save some face. The two headmasters were determined to leave. Prince Ning tried to persuade them to stay but to no avail, so he gave up on the idea. He sent someone to prepare a generous gift for the two and did not say anything more. Inviting these teachers to teach the crown prince was just to sharpen his temper and get rid of his previous lazy and casual habits. It would be best if he could become mature and diligent. However, it seemed that he had overestimated the abilities of these teachers. The application of mathematics is very broad. Astronomy, geography, architecture, taxation, and even food and fodder during battles are all inseparable from mathematics. If the crown prince's new method of counting can be implemented, it will be a blessing for the Jing kingdom. Before Teacher Chen left, he said a few words to Prince Ning with a serious expression. He was very respectful of the crown prince's new method of counting. His words were sincere and sincere. If it was not for the difference in status and age, he might have turned to the crown prince to learn more advanced mathematics. Although the imperial examination did not test one's ability in mathematics, the Directorate of Studies still maintained a course in mathematics. Every few years, the Directorate of Studies would recruit talented people in this field. Teacher Chen had studied mathematics all his life, so he naturally knew the use of mathematics. It covered a wide range that others could not even imagine. It was a pity that very few people could recognize this. Mathematics had never been valued by the imperial court, so it was naturally even more difficult to promote it. Right now, there was no doubt that it was a rare opportunity to develop mathematics. After the two of them left, a charming woman walked out from behind the screen in the study. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong with the two teachers? Is there any expert behind little Xian?" Just now, when she was behind the screen, she was also confused by what she heard. Yesterday, Teacher Wu's departure had already surprised her. He said that there was nothing he could teach little Xian. What Teacher Chen said just now seemed to be what he meant. There is no expert, but there is an extraordinary person," Prince Ning said coldly. "What extraordinary person?" The confusion on Princess Ning's face deepened. She looked at Prince Ning and said angrily, "If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you keeping me in suspense?" Prince Ning turned to look at her and asked, "Madam, do you remember Li Yi?" "Of course I remember," Princess Ning said as she rolled her eyes. She had a very deep impression of the young man who cured her of her depression, invented Rui Du and perfume, and saved the emperor at the prince's mansion. Could it be him? Then, a look of surprise appeared on her face. She said, "Does your highness mean that the expert who made the two teachers feel ashamed of their inferiority is that Li Yi? Who else could it be other than him?" Prince Ning snorted again. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. "Forget it. Since little Xian doesn't like it, let him be." Princess Ning waved her hand and said, "Because of that marriage, little Xian has been depressed for a long time. Let him decide these things himself. Marriage is an important matter. It is the order of the parents. Moreover, marrying into the Wang family is my brother." Prince Ning stopped there and said, "I can only let little Xian suffer," Princess Ning said with a sigh. "There is nothing to suffer," Prince Ning said. Prince Ning said, "In terms of family background, talent and appearance, Mingzhu of the Wang family is not worthy of him. Next year he will be at the age of 20. The marriage can't be delayed any longer." A look of pity appeared in Princess Ning's eyes. She didn't want to continue this topic. She changed the topic and said, "Li Yi is about the same age as little Xian, but he has so many abilities. Every one of them is beyond the reach of ordinary people. Is there really a person who is born with knowledge in this world?" He was the top talent of the Jing kingdom. He excelled in both poetry and painting. The Rui Du, perfume, liquor, and the soap that little Xian gave her were all made by him. Of course, his miraculous medical skills had even made her and the emperor feel indebted to him. In terms of knowledge, Xian had only met him once, and the two knowledgeable teachers had resigned out of shame. All of this was related to a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was really unimaginable. "I'm afraid only the heavens know whether there is a person who is born with knowledge in this world," King Ning said faintly. "However, his identity is much more interesting than I imagined." Hearing this, Princess Ning became curious. "Hasn't your highness already investigated his identity? Could it be that there are other secrets?" Prince Ning nodded. Ever since he got involved with his brother, he had to be more careful. Naturally, he couldn't treat him like before. He sent people to conduct a more detailed investigation. This time, he unexpectedly discovered something interesting. However, the conversation between the two of them in the study was not heard by outsiders. Chapter 223. He didn't know if it was because he had taught Li Xian too much last time that he hadn't completely digested it, or because he was confined in the prince's mansion. Li didn't see him in Rui's house for the next few days. Ruoqing was rehearsing the new play with the actors and actresses. The brothel that Li Yi frequented didn't open for several days. Only the young girl Xiao Zhu, who liked to climb walls, would occasionally poke her head out from the other side of the wall to ask him some questions about the details. After getting the answers, she would quickly jump off the wall and disappeared for a long time. Fortunately, he wasn't idle these days. When he had nothing to do, he would write out the stories and scripts that would be used in the future and give them to them. He didn't have to worry about anything else after that. In the era without photocopiers and printers, the only way to do it was to copy it by hand. Moreover, he could only copy it by himself. It wasn't even possible to find someone to write it for him. Writing with a brush was much more tiring than writing with a pencil or a ballpoint pen. Long masterpieces like Journey to the West and Legend of the White Snake weren't within Li Yi's consideration for the time being. Strange Stories from a Chinese studio was more suitable. The story wasn't long, but the content was very attractive. There were many classic stories in it, which was more than enough to support a brothel. He would write a few stories every day. If he was tired from copying, he would walk in the yard and do some less intense movements. Rui would occasionally come over to give him some pointers. Of course, he had never neglected his true chi physiotherapy every day. His body recovered surprisingly fast. It was almost the middle of November now. If he maintained this speed, his body would be fully recovered before the end of the year. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my father's death. Rui and I have to go back to the stockade village to pay our respects. My husband hasn't recovered yet, so you should stay here. I'll ask Uncle Fang to come over tomorrow, Lu Rui said to Li Yi while eating. Li Yi was stunned for a moment and then said, although I haven't recovered yet, it's okay to walk a bit more. I'll go back with you. As the son-in-law, he should go back and pay his respects on the anniversary of his father-in-law's death. Moreover, he had been hiding in such a small place all day long. He was afraid that before his old injury recovered, he would get a new one. He hadn't been back to the Willow Leaf village for a long time. It was good to go back and have a look. The mountain road is hard to walk on. Let me and Rui go, Lu Rui said looking at him. I'm really fine. Take a look if you don't believe me. While Rui was still doubtful about his physical condition, Li Yi had already stood up, patted his chest, twisted his waist and quickly walked around the house, indicating that the mountain path was nothing to him. Seeing Li Yi's insistence, Lu Rui could only nod helplessly. Young master, aren't you going to eat? Xiao Huan asked doubtfully when she saw that Li Yi did not sit down again after standing up. There was still a lot of food left in his bowl. Wait a minute, I think I twisted my waist just now. Li Yi put one hand on his waist and said awkwardly. It was better not to be too complacent, otherwise it was easy to twist his waist. This time, Rui massaged him for a long time with her unique method, and the bursts of pain gradually disappeared. He had a beautiful dream. The next morning he closed the shop and rented a carriage as usual. He got off at the foot of the Green Willow Mountain and went straight to the Willow Leaf village along the mountain road. The process of paying respects to his father-in-law was very simple. They didn't invite a Taoist priest to open a Taoist temple, nor did they invite a monk to chant sutras. The two sisters cleaned up the weeds around the grave, burned some paper money, and poured a jar of liquor produced by Rui workshop into the soil in front of the grave. Li Yi also went forward and kowtowed respectfully. Then he went back with Xiao Huan while his sister Rui had to stay there for a while. When they passed through the village, most of the people from the Lu family would come over and ask about it eagerly. When he was in Rui workshop, they would occasionally bring some things to have a look, put down the things, ask a few questions, stay for a short while and then get up and leave. No one would mention the previous grievances now. At least on the surface, it looked like a beautiful scene of harmonious neighbors. Young master, are you feeling better? When they walked somewhere in the village, a white-haired old man ran out of the yard. It's not a big problem now. Uncle Han had indirectly saved Li Yi's life. When he saw him, the smile on Li Yi's face was much warmer than before. That's good, that's good. Hearing that, the wrinkles on Uncle Han's face bloomed like flowers. The young master and miss had always helped him a lot, and the rice, noodles, meat and vegetables at home had never been cut off. A few days ago Miss came home and left a lot of money. He wanted to refuse, but Miss was determined, so he had to accept it. Knowing that the little things he made last time had helped the young master, he had always been indebted to them. Knowing that he could do something for the young master and Miss, he felt very happy. "Boyhan, is my chair fixed?" An old voice suddenly came from behind. Li looked back and saw an old man with a cane and a hunched body walking slowly towards him. "Second uncle." Xiao Huan hurriedly greeted him. In the Willow Leaf Village there was only one person who could call Uncle Han this way. Except for the old but strong second uncle, no one else had this qualification. "Second uncle." Uncle Han smiled and said, "It's fixed. I'll send it to you today." Second uncle nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Li Yi. He smacked his lips and shook his head, saying, "It's good to be a scholar, but your physique is too weak. To think that your great-grandfather was skilled in both literature and martial arts." After a while the old man ended his long speech and patted Li Yi's shoulder, saying, "In the future, you still need to spend more time practicing martial arts. Don't let any Tom, Dick, or Harry bully you. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your wife." After such a warning, the old man waved his hand and slowly walked away. Looking at the old man pausing a few steps, his body was hunched. No matter how you looked at it, it seemed that half of his foot was already in the ground. It was really hard to imagine how he picked up a solid rocking chair with one hand last time. On the way back, Li Yi curiously asked the little servant girl, "Did second uncle know martial arts when he was young?" "I don't know." The little servant girl shook her head adorably. "When Xiao Huan and Miss were young, second uncle was like this." The childhood that Xiao Huan mentioned was about 10 years ago. Li Yi couldn't help but be amazed in his heart. Second uncle's vitality was really tenacious. The woman with a bucket waist stood at the door of her house, watching Li Yi and Xiao Huan walk into the courtyard. Her expression was extremely complicated. Wu Ying was dead. He kidnapped the son-in-law of Rui's family and wanted to snatch the formula of Rui's due. But in the end he died in an internal fight with the other villains. She had clearly seen Wu Ying's evil intentions before, but she didn't warn him in time. She didn't expect that he actually did that kind of thing. Wu Ying's parents died when he was young. Ever since he was young she had taken care of this nephew a lot. When she learned of his death, her feelings were indescribably complicated. This kind of complicated feeling was even clearer when she saw Li Yi. Although he deserved it, but after all he was still her nephew. After a long time, second Aunt Wu sighed and turned to walk back into the house. At the same time in the Anxi County Yamen, Mingzu frowned as she read an official document from the Ministry of Justice. Chapter 224. Bone-paring knife, Zhu Tu Fu, death rush Chui Yen, evil man Jingji. What are these people planning by gathering in Qing and Prefecture? Mingzhu's brows furrowed slightly as she murmured. The names she mentioned were all infamous in Jianghu. They despised the government, disregarded the law, and regarded human life as nothing more than grass. However, their martial arts were extremely high and it was difficult to trace them. Wanting to capture them and bring them to justice was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Moreover, the imperial court and the Jianghu had always maintained a delicate balance. It was not to say that they did not interfere with each other, but as long as these people did not raise flags to rebel or do some extremely evil things, the imperial court would not put in any effort to encircle and suppress them. As for the disputes in the Jianghu, the local authorities actually turned a blind eye. However, in recent days, countless people from the Jianghu and underworld had gathered in Qing and Prefecture. Before they had even entered the city they had all disappeared. She would never believe that they did not have any ulterior motives. She had practiced martial arts since she was young and was no stranger to the matters of the Jianghu. These people were extremely powerful. If they really gathered together and caused trouble, they would probably have to mobilize the garrison in the prefectural city to quell it. In the next few days, have your subordinates keep a close eye on their areas of jurisdiction. If there is anything out of the ordinary, report to me immediately, she said lightly as she put down the document in her hand. Yes, boss, I will go and remind them now. Lu Yi, who had been promoted to the head captain of the 3rd Squad of bailiffs, had a solemn expression. He saluted her and immediately retreated. Only Mingzu and a scribe were left in the hall. Those people would not have gathered here for no reason. They had to figure out their intentions. In fact, the imperial court had always been worried about people like them, especially when it came to such a large-scale event, so they paid even more attention to it. Mingzu had a thoughtful expression. After a moment, she spoke again, "Investigate the purpose of those people and report to me as soon as possible." "Your Highness, do not worry. I will do it immediately." When the young scribe heard this, he stood up, bowed, and quickly disappeared. 10 miles away from the prefectural city, at a roadside tea house beside the official road. I have roamed the pugilistic world for so long, but I have never tasted such disgusting tea. Beside a table by the roadside, a bald man with grease stains on his face spat out the tea in his mouth. "Waiter, get your ass over here." After hearing the man's thunderous voice, the shop assistant with a white towel on his shoulder hurriedly ran over and asked with a face full of smiles, "What can I do for you, sir?" The bald man smashed the teapot on the table and said angrily, "Change a pot of good tea for me. If you still use that kind of trash to fool me, I will smash your broken tea house." "Sir, this is already our most," the waiter explained helplessly. However, he saw the man's face turn fierce, and he immediately swallowed the rest of his words. This tea house was located in the wilderness. Other than the passers-by and merchants, there were also many Jianghu people. The waiter had been serving tea here for some time and knew their temperament. If they did not agree with each other, they would smash this small tea house. It was definitely not just to scare him. "Sir, please wait a moment. I will immediately change it for you." The waiter smiled apologetically as he said this. This time he would probably have to bring out the best tea that the shopkeeper had kept hidden. Otherwise he might not be able to get past this evil man. There were many passers-by resting in the tea house. Seeing this, many people frowned. However, it was best not to cause trouble when they were outside. Moreover, the bald man did not seem to be someone to be trifled with. Even if they were angry, they did not dare to say anything. The waiter quickly brought out a pot of good tea. This time, the bald man did not make things difficult for him. He scolded, "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." After finishing the tea, he stood up and walked outside. The waiter's eyelids twitched and he hurriedly chased after him. Sir, please wait a moment. What else do you want?" The bald man turned around and glared at him. "Sir, you haven't paid for the tea," the waiter said timidly. "Ah." The bald man laughed a few times. He pulled out 2 boning knives from his back and stabbed them into the wooden table. The tips of the knives pierced through the table. The evil man held the handles and said, "What did you just say? I didn't hear it clearly. Say it again?" "No, it's nothing. Sir, please take care." The tip of the knives was suffused with a cold light. The waiter shivered and immediately hid far away. He no longer dared to mention the tea money. The bald man pulled out the boning knives and left after laughing a few times. Inside the tea house, a young man looked at his companion with dissatisfaction and asked, "Why did you stop me just now?" The man beside him smiled bitterly and said, "Junior brother, being outside is not like being in the sect. You have to be careful. Did you see the 2 boning knives just now? If I'm not wrong, that person is..." After hearing the man's words, the young man's expression softened a little. However, he still glared fiercely in the direction that the evil man had left. A good martial arts world has been turned into a mess by this kind of person. Hateful, really hateful. Should junior brother lower your voice? Don't let others hear you. It hasn't been peaceful here these past few days. The man lowered his voice so that others could no longer hear him. On a mountain road somewhere, a man with thin cheeks and a gloomy expression clapped his hands and said coldly, "With only this much ability, you still want to learn how to rob others? What kind of mountain bandits are you? Go be a ghost." On the ground in front of him were 2 famous bandits. However, their necks were twisted strangely to one side. Their faces were filled with fear and they had stopped breathing long ago. With 2 bangs, the man kicked the 2 corpses to the side of the precipice. He looked left and right before his figure quickly disappeared on the mountain road. In another place, beside a stream, a figure hidden in a thicket looked at the women washing clothes by the stream with a lustful gaze. His eyes flickered with light. After a moment, the glimmer of light receded. Only a regretful voice could be heard. "How can a village girl from the mountains compare to the young ladies of the city? Forget it, let's get down to business first." The short and stout dwarf with a fat head and big ears looked at the stream again before reluctantly withdrawing his gaze. He turned and walked deeper into the forest. For the ordinary people of Anshi County, the past few days were extremely ordinary winter days. The gloomy weather lasted for a few days. Countless people were looking forward to the early arrival of the first snow of this winter. Auspicious snow indicated a bumper harvest in the coming year, and only then would they have a good harvest in the coming year. After experiencing a drought, they couldn't bear any more torment. However, it was not easy for the bailiffs and citizens of the government and county government. Within the prefectural city, everyone was on high alert. They followed the orders of their superiors and did their best to search for suspicious people within the city. They were extremely cautious. The people of the Jianghu near Qin and prefecture also had the same feeling. Occasionally they would hear some news and rumors from remote tea houses and restaurants. They could faintly feel that Qin and prefecture would not be peaceful in the next few days. The isolated Willow Leaf village was as quiet and peaceful as ever. After Sister Rui paid her respects to her father, she stayed in the village for a day. The next day she returned to the prefectural city with Li Yi. Second uncle's words make sense. My husband should practice more martial arts. Lu Rui said with a smile after hearing Li Yi tell her about yesterday's events. Li Yi curled his lips. It was easy for an old man to say that. He had practiced martial arts often, but he had not made much progress. Until now he had not felt the existence of Jinqi. He was also very helpless about this. Rui, take brother-in-law and Xiaohuan back to the city first. I have forgotten something and need to return to the village. On the way down the mountain, Lu Rui suddenly said when they were almost halfway down. Lu Rui turned her head, looked at her, and nodded. Seeing the three figures disappear at a corner of the mountain path, Lu Rui turned around and looked at a low slope that they had just passed. It was one of the few places in the city where evil was hidden. At this moment there were many people gathered in a dark house. Most of them were burly and carried weapons with them. Their bodies exuded a faint murderous aura, which was incomparably terrifying. If an ordinary person accidentally barged in, they would probably be so frightened that they would immediately fall to the ground. Why isn't that shorty here yet? A bald man in the middle glanced at the crowd and asked impatiently. Many of them had strange expressions on their faces when they heard this. Other than the boning knife Zhu Tufu, there were not many people present who dared to use the term shorty to describe that person. Not only that, even words like short, dwarf, and even short were taboo in front of that person. If they accidentally offended him, they probably wouldn't even know how they died. After all, other than being lustful, that person was also famous for his bad temper in the martial arts world. Once, someone had been brutally killed by him because they had mocked his physique. Even they shuddered when they thought of the tragic scene. Forget it, there's no need to wait for him. That dwarf has probably already died on a woman's belly. Beside the bald man, a middle-aged man with a thin face and a gloomy expression said mockingly. He turned his head to look at the other burly man. Brother Zhou, was my good-for-nothing brother really captured by that girl surnamed Lu? The burly man nodded and said in a deep voice, if Brother Cui doesn't believe me, you can go out and ask around. In the past 2 years, how many of our brothers in the Green Forest have fallen to that woman's hands? Come to think of it, those brothers have no grudge against her, but that woman just won't let them go. She would rather become the minions of the government. My brother, who also fell to her hands. I'm afraid that his head will soon roll to the ground. I say, Brother Zhou, are you a man or not? A woman can actually make you so afraid, and you even need these brothers to come and help. The bald man looked at the burly man with disdain and said, it's just a woman. I, your father, will let her win with only one hand. Oh, since you Zhu Tufu look down on women so much, why don't you spar with me? A feminine voice came from the crowd and everyone made way for her. A skinny woman with a scar on her face walked out from the crowd. Zhu Tufu originally wanted to agree, but when he saw that it was this woman who spoke, he immediately swallowed the words he was about to say and said with an embarrassed smile, the third lady is a heroine among women, so of course she is not one of them. This old Zhu admires you very much, but as for the spar, let's forget about it. If it was any other woman, he would have already taken out his 2 boning knives and charged at her. The infamous Zhu Tufu was not like the shorty, who knew how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. However, even though the person in front of him was a woman, there was probably not a single person present who treated her as a woman. This woman was abandoned by her fiancé, and on the night of the man's wedding she beheaded the newlyweds in front of all their friends and relatives. She swore to kill all the unfaithful men in the world. Over the years, the number of men who died by her hands was not small. Even someone as fierce as Zhu Tufu felt a little scared when he saw her. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, the burly man laughed and said, "We are all brothers, so let's not hurt each other. I'm sure that since everyone is here they all have some grudges against that woman. What we should do now is what we need to discuss." "What's there to discuss? There are so many of us. Even if that woman is a grandmaster, she will die on the spot. Senior Han's only son has also been captured by that woman and handed over to the authorities. Senior has already said that whoever can take that woman's head will be accepted by Senior Han as his disciple. This is a rare opportunity. Also, Minister Zhao of Chuzhou has also said that whoever can capture that woman will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver." Hearing the angry chatter of the crowd, even the instigator of this matter, the burly man, did not expect this. He had only spread the news to gather some people who had a grudge against that woman to act together to increase their chances of success, but he did not expect so many people to respond. That woman had offended almost half of the heroes in the Jianghu near Qin and Prefecture. Chapter 226. Just thinking about it, if these people's target was him, the burly man felt a chill run down his spine. That was practically a death sentence. That Senior Han had become famous 20 years ago. At that time his martial arts were already top-notch. Now he was probably even more unfathomable. Even if he hadn't stepped into the Grandmaster realm, he wasn't far from it. If one could become his disciple and receive his guidance, their martial arts cultivation would definitely improve. Regardless of whether or not they had any grudges with that woman, just this one condition was enough to make countless people scramble like ducks. Zhao Yuanwei could be considered half a person of Jianghu. His family was extremely wealthy, and there weren't many people who would sit still for 1,000 taels of silver to buy that woman. He had originally only wanted to gather some people to avenge his brother, but now that things had developed to this point, it had long since gotten out of his control. At this point, apart from his group of people, who knew how many people were eyeing that woman? With such a large commotion, it was impossible to hide from the authorities. Those who could accept this kind of transaction or who had a grudge with that woman were definitely not clean. If this dragged on for too long, it wouldn't be a good thing for them. I have to make my move as soon as possible to avoid long nights of dreams. In an instant, the burly man had already made his decision. On the mountain path, Fang grabbed the midget's collar and lifted him up, fiercely asking, "Speak. What kind of evil plan do you have? Who sent you?" After experiencing the matter of the young master being kidnapped last time, Fang hated this kind of person to the extreme. This guy was lying in ambush on the side of the road. He definitely wanted to harm the young master. If it wasn't for the young master might have really fallen into this guy's trap. Since I've fallen into your hands, if you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please." The midget glanced at Fang and coldly snorted. He had an illustrious reputation in Jianghu. These years he had done all sorts of evil deeds. Naturally, he would think of what would happen if he fell into the hands of the authorities. They were all hot-blooded men. Even if their heads fell off, they would still be heroes in their next life. You do have some guts. Upon hearing this, Fang didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and turned to look at Lu Rui. "Eldest miss, leave this matter to me. I want to see how long this guy can keep his mouth shut." He sneered at the dwarf, grabbed him by the neck and walked deeper into the bushes. Some time ago he had learned many tricks in the yamen. Unfortunately, he had never had the chance to try them out. This time the shorty was really lucky. Of course, that kind of brutal and bloody scene could not be seen by the eldest Mississippi. Soon enough, the dwarf's voice came from the depths of the bushes. "Bah! If you have any tricks up your sleeves, just use them. If I shout, I'll call you Grandpa. Grandpa, spare me. I'll tell you everything." After a while, Fang carried the unconscious dwarf out of the bushes and casually threw him on the ground. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. "Young miss." He threw the midget down and looked at Lu Rui. He opened his mouth and only spoke after a long time. "This is bad." As he walked on the streets of the prefectural city, Li noticed that there were more bailiffs patrolling the streets than usual. It seemed that every district had increased their manpower. These bailiffs naturally recognized him. They came over and greeted him respectfully. "Magistrate." They looked a little tired. Did something big happen in the prefectural city these 2 days? Li looked at one of the bailiffs and asked in confusion. The bailiff immediately replied, "Your Excellency, I'm not too sure either. It's just that the higher-ups have ordered us to be on guard for the next few days." After asking a few more questions, Li Yi did not get any answers. He waved his hand and signaled for the bailiffs to continue patrolling. He was still on sick leave and could not be bothered with so many things. He believed that Her Highness would take care of these matters. Out of the way, out of the way. Just as the three of them were about to reach the entrance of Rui Lane, there was a sudden commotion on the street in front of them. A man ran over recklessly. Li Yi took a closer look. This man was the one who was arrested and sent to the yamen for injuring someone. He was later released because of his filial piety. His name seemed to be Wu Er. Wu Er was carrying another person on his back, and the bailiff uniform he was wearing was stained with blood. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, but that Wu Er had already rushed past him and ran straight into the Huichen Hall not far away. Rui, bring Xiaohuan back first. I'll go take a look. Li Yi did not see clearly who was wearing the bailiff uniform, but he was sure that it was his subordinate. He frowned and informed Rui before quickly walking over. Lu Rui and Xiaohuan did not return to Rui Lane. They watched as he hurriedly left and followed. When Li Yi arrived at Huichen Hall, other than Wu Er, the two bailiffs who were patrolling earlier were also inside. Dainyu, what happened to you? Looking at Dainyu, who was lying on the ground with a pale face and a few wounds that were still bleeding, the expressions on the two men's faces were both shocked and angry. Let's not talk about this first. Wu Er quickly replied. Treating the wounds is more important. No, there are too many wounds on his body. We can't stop the bleeding. Dr. Chen's face was full of anxiety. He had already poured different kinds of hemostatic medicine on the wounds, but the man was still bleeding. If this continued, it would not be long before he lost a lot of blood. Even the gods could not save him. Li Yi had just walked into Huichen Hall and happened to hear Dr. Chen's words. Just as he was about to quickly walk over, a figure behind him was faster than him. In the blink of an eye, the figure appeared beside Dainyu and reached out to poke him twice. You. Dr. Chen was shocked when he saw the woman who suddenly appeared and randomly poked the patient's body. He was about to reprimand her when his eyes suddenly widened and he swallowed his words. At this moment, on the man lying on the ground, the bleeding wounds had stopped. Although there were still traces of blood seeping out, it was much better than before. I can at most seal his acupuncture points for 15 minutes. You better think of a way to save him during this time. Lu Rui stood up and said to Dr. Chen. I can only apply some hemostatic medicine and bandage his wound. As for whether he can survive, it will depend on his luck. Dr. Chen said honestly. When Li Yi heard this, he immediately ordered the servant girl beside him. Xiaohuan, go to the shop and bring my small medicine box over. The servant girl knew that the situation was urgent. She responded and quickly ran out. Am I going to die? Dainyu, who had already woken up, said with a trembling voice. A trace of despair appeared on his face. When he heard Dr. Chen's words, the constable next to him revealed a sorrowful expression. He bent down and held Dainyu's hand tightly. He said, Brother Dainyu, don't worry. If you die, I will take care of Auntie until she dies. Good brother? Dainyu's face revealed a grateful expression. Don't worry about my nephew. I will take care of him until he grows up. The constable continued. The area that Dainyu was patrolling today should have been him. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to be closer to home and swap places with Dainyu, he would have been the one lying here. As for sister-in-law, I will help you take good care of her. Brother Dainyu, you can go in peace. The constable's heart was filled with sorrow and he held Dainyu's hand even tighter. Dainyu's pale face suddenly changed. He turned and grabbed Dr. Chen's arm and said with a trembling voice, Doctor, save me. I don't want to die. Chapter 227. Dr. Chen had a helpless look on his face. If it was any other injury, it would be fine. However, this kind of bleeding wound was the most difficult to deal with. He could only do his best. Even on the battlefield, this kind of minor injury would only be treated with a simple bandage. If the injury was too serious, he could only add a knife to help the patient. Dainyu looked at Dr. Chen's expression and suddenly had a bad premonition from the bottom of his heart. Why could he faintly feel the same aura from this old doctor as the bald man with the bone-paring knife? It was as if the bald man would stab him a few times in the next moment. Young master, the medicine box is here. Xiaohuan ran in with a wooden box panting and handed it to Li Yi. The servant girl knew what was in the box. Other than some commonly used medicine, there was wine and needles. However, she had never seen the young master use them before. Wait. Seeing that Dr. Chen was about to pour the unknown powder on Dinyo's wound, Li quickly walked over. County Lieutenant. Dr. Chen turned around and looked at him with a face full of doubt. This man's injury could not be delayed any longer. Li opened the wooden box and took out the things inside. He said, "Let me deal with the wound." Dr. Chen looked doubtful. Although this county magistrate Li knew Lord Lu, even if Lord Lu came here personally, he wouldn't be able to cure this kind of injury. Where did this young magistrate's confidence come from? Lord? Dinyo was stunned for a moment and said hesitantly. This old doctor looked a little unreliable, but in terms of medical skills he should be better than the county lieutenant, right? Do you trust me? Li looked up at Dinyo and asked. Dinyo and Li looked at each other. It was as if he saw the county lieutenant who was full of vigor in the court again. Dinyo's heart calmed down a little. He gritted his teeth and said, "I trust you." Seeing that the injured person also said so, Dr. Chen did not say anything else. Even if he dealt with it himself, he only had less than 50% confidence. Since the county lieutenant was willing to take this risk, he was happy to do it. Might hurt a little. Bear with it. Li took out a small bottle of disinfectant. The wound on Dinyo's body needed to be stitched up. In order to prevent the wound from getting infected, he had to disinfect it before stitching it up. As if he was trying his best to stay awake, Dinyo smiled and said, Dinyo don't have any other abilities, but I can still endure this pain. Roar. Li used a clean cloth that had been boiled and dipped in alcohol to help him clean the area around the wound. The moment he touched the wound, Dinyo screamed. In later generations, iodophor was commonly used to disinfect because alcohol was too stimulating to the human body. Ordinary people could not tolerate it. That feeling might be even more stimulating than directly sprinkling salt on the wound. Li glanced at him and continued what he was doing. If it wasn't for Dinyo's powerful knockout drug, he might not even have the chance to stand here. This time he had a chance to repay him. Roar. When Li was disinfecting his wound, Dinyo did not look like a seriously injured person at all. He was full of energy and kept screaming. After a while, Li finally stopped what he was doing. He turned to look at Lu Rui and asked, "Is there any way to make him calm down temporarily?" He was also a person who cared about his reputation. If this guy kept screaming while lying on the ground, people who did not know better would think that he did something to him. Yes. Lu Rui's answer was very straightforward. She chopped the back of Dinyo's head with her hand, and the world finally became quiet. Dr. Chen and the two constables who were supporting Dinyo saw this, and their mouths twitched at the same time. As expected of Mississippi Lu, this trick was very effective. Not only did Dinyo stop screaming when he disinfected the wound with alcohol, even when he started to stitch the wound with catgut, Dinyo seemed to be asleep and did not have any reaction. Except for Li Yi, everyone had a reaction. Xiao Huan did not know what the needles and thread in the box were used for before, but now she knew. Seeing her son-in-law stitch the man's wound as if he was sewing clothes, her face was already pale with fear. She covered her eyes and did not dare to watch anymore. As for the apprentice in the medical center who was not mentally strong enough, he ran to the backyard when Li Yi stitched the first stitch. He leaned against the wall and vomited. The scene just now had a huge impact on him. He would not be able to have any good dreams for the next few nights. The man who carried Dinyo here, Wu Er, also felt his stomach churn when he saw this. Looking at the county magistrate who continued to stitch the wound calmly, the expression in his eyes immediately changed. Dr. Chen had been a doctor for decades, and the two constables had seen some big scenes because of their profession. Naturally, they would not be so embarrassed, but their expressions were still not normal. County magistrate, this. Dr. Chen, who had never seen such a method, swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He did not dare to stop it, so he spoke with a trembling voice. Just as he said a few words, Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Be quiet, don't talk, I'll take responsibility if anything happens." He was fully focused at this moment, and with the help of the library in his mind, he could ensure that his hands would not make any mistakes. Any external interference would have a significant impact on him. Lu Rui stood beside him and watched as the wound was stitched up. She clenched her fists tightly, and her face was slightly pale, but she did not look away. After the wound was stitched up, Li took out the sterilized gauze from the box and bandaged Dinyo's wound before standing up. Dr. Chen should know what to do next. A quarter of an hour had already passed, but there was no more blood flowing out of the stitched wound. Dr. Chen's face revealed a shocked expression. At this moment he finally understood why the imperial physician, Lord Lu, was so polite to this young county officer. This was a method of stitching wounds that he had never seen before. If all the doctors in the world could learn it, countless lives would be saved, especially on the battlefield, and countless soldiers would benefit from it. Dr. Chin did not dare to think about it. The next moment, his face turned solemn, and he solemnly bowed to Li Yi and said, "May I be so bold as to ask County Magistrate to spread this method to the world? The people of the Jing Kingdom will remember your kindness for generations to come." The doctors in this era, regardless of their medical skills, all had noble sentiments. They always thought about the people. Imperial Physician Lu was like that, and now Dr. Chin was also like that. Li Yi waved his hand. This matter was not urgent. He had to find out how Dinyo got injured first. This was in Qing, and prefectural city, and someone actually dared to attack a constable. In the future it would be a felony of assaulting a police officer. It was obvious that the person did not respect the county magistrate. When he raised his hand he found that it was blood red. He did not have sterile gloves and he only sterilized it. When he stitched up the wound there was naturally a lot of blood on it. When he was concentrating he did not notice anything. Now that he came back to his senses, he saw that both of his hands were bloody, and a smell of blood hit his face. Li suddenly felt his stomach churning and his head became dizzy. "What's wrong with you?" Lu Rui was the first to notice his abnormality. Just as he opened his mouth, he saw Dr. Chen's body shake a few times, and he fell straight back. Chapter 228. After the wound was stitched up, Dainyu, who was no longer in any danger, was temporarily placed in the medical center. Lu Rui's hand chop was not light. Half an hour had passed, but he still had not woken up. No matter what, Dinyo was finally out of danger. Before Li Yi could open his mouth to ask, the constable who was on good terms with Dinyo looked at Wu Er and asked, "Who hurt Dinyo? Where is the murderer now?" Dainyu was injured because of him, so he naturally could not ignore this matter. Dr. Chin brought a basin of clean water, and Li Yi asked Xiao Huan to fetch a piece of soap from the shop to wash the blood on his hands. When Wu Er spoke he raised his head and listened. "It was bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu," Wu Er said. "What Tufu?" The two bailiffs had clearly not heard of this name, and a trace of confusion appeared on their faces. The two were not people of Jianghu, so it was normal that they had not heard of Zhu Tufu. Wu Er was not surprised and explained, "Zhu Tufu is a famous villain in the underworld, and he has a bad reputation in the underworld." He dared not say that in the entire Jianghu, but in the territory of Qing and Prefecture, there were not many people in Jianghu who did not know of bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu. What bone-paring knife or butcher knife? This nickname is too ugly. As Li Yi was thinking about this, he noticed that when Wu Er mentioned Zhu Tufu, the corner of Lu Rui's mouth twitched. He wiped his hands clean, stood up and asked Lu Rui, "You or that Zhu Tufu who is more powerful?" Lu Rui looked at him indifferently and did not speak, as if he did not care to answer. Li Yi suddenly understood. Compared to his sister-in-law, that Zhu Tufu was far from enough. The bailiff who spoke just now gritted his teeth and said, "Who cares about him? Dainyu has no grudge against him, but he was so ruthless. Where is he now? I will go back to the government office and call a few more brothers. We must arrest him." "Absolutely not." Hearing this, Wu Er waved his hand and said, "That Zhu Tufu is one of the top experts in the Green Forest. He came to Qing, and to take the life of the woman from the Willow Leaf Stockade. He has gathered a large group of Green Forest experts around him. You must not act rashly." Wu Er himself could be considered half a man of Jianghu, so he knew very well how powerful those people were when they gathered together. Not to mention a few constables, even all the local government laborers would not be a match for them. The only reason that the injured constable was still alive was probably because Zhu Tufu had some misgivings and did not dare to kill anyone in the prefectural city. Even so, if it were not for the fact that he happened to see the constable named Dainyu when those people left, he would have lost his life due to excessive blood loss. Wu Er, who was busy stopping the two bailiffs, didn't notice that after he said those words, the beautiful woman and the county lieutenant's expressions turned extremely unsightly. "What did you say?" Lu Rui flashed and appeared in front of Wu Er. She stared at him and asked, "What woman from the Willow Leaf village?" Wu Er was stunned for a moment and did not know what was going on. Could it be that this young lady also had a grudge against that woman? At this moment there was no time for him to think too much. Li Yi had already walked over with quick steps and said with a serious face, "What do you know about this matter?" Tell me everything. Okay. Wu Er was very grateful to the county lieutenant, who he was indebted to. After a moment of daze, he organized his thoughts and told him everything he knew, regardless of whether it was important or not. The county lieutenant has just been in office, so you may not know, but in the past 2 years, many people from the underworld who were wanted by the government have been captured in Qing and Prefecture. Wu Er had 2 brothers in his family. The elder brother was somewhat skilled in martial arts and had traveled the martial world for many people. Naturally, he knew some things about Jianghu. When he came back this time, he talked with Wu Er about some things. After capturing so many people from the underworld, the woman must have offended many people. Senior Han is a famous martial artist and only has 1 son. Because he committed a murder, he is also wanted by the government. After he escaped to Qing and Prefecture, he was captured by the woman and handed over to the government. This time, Senior Han spread the word that if anyone could take the woman's head, he would take that person as his disciple. Also, Officer Zhao of Chuzhou, although I don't know what kind of grudge he has with the woman, he also put 1,000 taels of silver on his head. Listening to Wu Er's story, Lu Rui's face gradually darkened. She knew very well what her sister had done in the past 2 years. If it wasn't for capturing these wanted criminals and exchanging them for money and food, the family would have run out of food a long time ago. They wouldn't have been able to survive until she kidnapped Li Yi. In the past 2 years, her sister would often go out for a few days. When she came back, she would occasionally have some scars on her body. She would keep some of the rice and food she received from the government and distribute most of it to the family. If it wasn't for this, who knew how many people would have died during the 2 years of famine? And the thing that she had been worried about had finally happened. How many people are there? Li Yi looked at Wu Er and asked in a low voice. Wu Er thought for a moment and said, with Bone-Paring Knife, Zhu Tufu and Death Rush Cui Yen as the leaders, the number of people from the underworld is the highest. There are about 30 of them. Although Senior Han and Officer Zhao also attracted many people, most of them acted alone. Although there are more people, I heard that the woman is very skilled in martial arts and is much less of a threat than the former. In the end, Wu Er had only heard about it. This was all that his brother had revealed to him. Senior Han, Officer Zhao, are these the so-called heroes of the martial arts world? Li Yi said in a low voice. When he turned around to look, Lu Rui had disappeared without him noticing. Wu Er snorted and said, although Zhu Tufu and Cui Yen are skilled in martial arts, they are not heroes. In the eyes of true heroes of the martial arts world, they are just a group of powerful bandits. Although Senior Han loves his son, he can't distinguish between good and evil. I'm afraid that in the future he will be laughed at by countless people. As for Officer Zhao, I heard that he has always been in close contact with these people. I don't know how many dirty tricks he used to build up his family business today. Wu Er's face was full of resentment and his words were full of disdain for these people. However, Li Yi was no longer concerned about these things. Li Yi turned around and patted the constable's shoulder as he said, Wei Chang, please take this lady to the county government office. I'll leave her safety in your hands. Don't worry, my lord. I will definitely protect this young lady. The constable named Wei Chang immediately bowed and said, Young master, I. Xiao Huan opened her mouth with a pale face. Li Yi touched her head and said with a smile, Be good and listen to the young master. Stay in the government office and don't run around. I will come to pick you up after I finish this matter. I'll be counting on you. Li Yi glanced at the constable again before turning around and leaving. Young master. Xiao Huan anxiously wanted to chase after him, but the constable was already in front of her. Constable Wei touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, Young lady, please listen to the county lieutenant and follow me back to the government office. Lao Si, you can't die. If you die like this, how are we going to live? In the Willow Leaf Village, a woman in coarse clothes knelt on the ground and wailed. In front of her, a middle-aged man was lying on the ground. His face was pale and there was a trace of blood on the clothes on his chest. The 7 or 8-year-old naughty boy stood there in a daze. He didn't know what to do with the scene in front of him. After the woman pinched his thigh, he immediately shriveled up and wailed. Seeing this, the onlookers looked at each other. They had just arrived when they heard the noise and didn't know what had happened. Fourth aunt, fourth uncle is only slightly injured. He won't die. Lu Rui lowered her head and said to her, If it weren't for you, would Lao Si be beaten up like this? It would have been better if Lu Rui hadn't opened her mouth. The moment she opened her mouth, the woman immediately glared at her and said, You have offended those Jianghu people. Now they want to kill you. Even fourth sister has suffered an unexpected calamity. Those people kill without batting an eye. When the time comes, even we will be buried with you. We won't be able to live on anymore. Not long after the woman finished speaking, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Lao Si's wife, what did you say? What Jianghu people? What is all this fighting and killing? Say something. Lao Si's wife's words were very frightening. What did she mean by kill and be buried with you? People who didn't know the inside story trembled and urged her. You can ask her. The woman stretched out her finger and pointed at Lu Rui, saying, she just had to provoke those murderous geniuses. Great, now she's dragging our entire stronghold down with her. If it wasn't for the fact that fourth brother's hands and feet were injured and he still had some martial arts left, I'm afraid he would have abandoned us mother and son to die first. In any case, I can't stay in this stronghold anymore. You can stay if you want, but don't blame me for not warning you. The woman helped the middle-aged man up from the ground and walked back to their house. Before they left, she even kicked the naughty child beside her and scolded, what are you waiting for? Go home and pack your things to escape. Lao Si's wife's words became more and more terrifying. Everyone was shocked and suspicious. After glancing at Lu Rui, they hurriedly chased after Lao Si's family. Lao Si's family, don't be anxious. Speak clearly. That's right. Don't scare us. What exactly happened? Tell us. We'll think of a solution together. Eldest young mistress. Fang turned to look at Lu Rui. He wanted to say something but stopped. Lu Rui's expression did not change. She looked at Lao Si's wife, who was spitting saliva everywhere. She looked away and said, Uncle Fang, let Lao Si and Juzi go down the mountain today. Find a place to rest in the prefectural city. I'll help you settle down in the prefectural city in 2 days. Don't go back to the village. Eldest young mistress, what do you mean? Fang frowned and said, aren't they just a few scums? If one comes, Fang will kill one. If two come, I'll kill both. What's there to be afraid of? Sister. As soon as Fang finished speaking, a white figure dashed over from afar. Lu Rui's pretty face was covered in frost, and her body emitted a faint murderous intent. Rui, you say, how did you provoke these people? After a while, the Lu family members who learned the whole thing from Lao Si's wife all gathered in the small courtyard. A middle-aged man opened his mouth and sighed. His voice was full of resentment. What should we do? How can we fight against those heroes of the underworld? Rui, you've brought disaster upon us. Another middle-aged woman looked at Lu Rui and said with a pale face. Rui had captured a lot of Lulin village tyrants and handed them over to the government, but she had also offended those people. The Willow Leaf village would not have peace in the future. Their peaceful life for dozens of years naturally could not continue. Of course, although they complained, no one dared to say a few harsh words. After all, they knew the temperament of the two sisters. If they really got serious, none of them would be able to stop them. We can't fight against those people. I'm afraid we can't live in the village anymore. A man sighed. Everyone agreed. This was also the result of their discussion just now. Although they were born and grew up here, nothing was more important than their own lives. Those people's target was only Rui. If they left the village, they would not go so far as to let them go. Moreover, they didn't feel anything before. But since the candied Ha's business became profitable, their lives became comfortable. They gradually felt that living in the village was really inconvenient. Many of them had long thought of moving out. This incident was just a prelude. With their current net worth, they could live comfortably anywhere they wanted. They could find a new place to start their candied Ha's business, and they wouldn't have to pay the joining fee anymore. Wouldn't that be much better than their current lives? But they would not be willing to leave like this. A woman pushed the old man who was lying on a rocking chair in the courtyard and said, "Second uncle, say something." The old man who was napping was shaken awake by her. His eyes were half open and he said, "What did you say?" "Second uncle, you're an elder. You should also say your opinion on this matter." The woman said again. A confused look appeared on the old man's face. He said, "You want me to eat?" "No, I don't want to eat. I just ate at third brother's house." After saying that, he turned over in the rocking chair and changed into a more comfortable position. He continued to nap. Just as the woman was about to speak, a voice was heard. Lu Rui looked at them and said, "This matter, Rui, has indeed caused trouble for everyone. If any uncle wants to leave, as long as you let me know, you can get 10 taels of silver from me as a settlement fee." The people of the Lu family smiled. They had been waiting for this for a long time. This is so embarrassing. Fourth aunt, who had just reprimanded her, smiled. In that case, thank you, Rui. Count me in. We were also forced to do this. I hope Rui won't blame us. Everyone spoke up one after another. Every family who wanted to leave received 10 taels of silver and happily went back to pack up their belongings, planning to leave as soon as possible. 10 taels of silver as a settlement fee was undoubtedly a huge sum of money for them. It was enough for them to settle anywhere outside the prefectural city. Lu Rui's expression was cold as she looked at everything coldly. Lu Rui, on the other hand, looked at them with a smile. From today onwards, she really had nothing to do with these nominal uncles. Chapter 229. Li Yi urged the worker to speed up the whole way, and they arrived at the foot of Green Willow Mountain in half the usual time. Without any delay, they arrived at the stronghold without any incident. Before they entered the stronghold, a few people walked towards them. Li Yi easily recognized that it was 7th Uncle Lu's family. When they first wanted to enter the candied hawthorn business, he was one of the first to speak up. At this moment, this family was full of bags of various sizes, and even the 2 brats were no exception. When they saw Li Yi at the entrance of the stronghold, 7th Uncle Lu and his wife froze for a moment. The expressions on their faces became strange. They didn't greet him and walked straight past Li Yi. The 2 brats stopped in their tracks and raised their heads to look at him. They called out in a low voice, "Mister," and turned to chase after their parents. Li Yi stood where he was and looked into the stronghold. A few blurry figures carrying luggage walked towards him. Among these people there were members of the Lu clan, and there were also ordinary villagers. The way they looked at him could be described as strange. More people brushed past him without saying a word. Occasionally, some people would come up to him and clasp their hands in thanks. For those villagers who didn't even have land, 10 taels of silver was enough for their entire family to spend for 2 years if they were frugal. Although Rui was only the head of the stronghold in name, and they had never acknowledged her in their hearts, from this point, it could be seen that she treated them well. These people didn't hold any resentment in their hearts, but they were more or less reluctant to leave the place where they had lived for so long. He didn't know if it was Li Yi's imagination, but when he walked through the stronghold, he felt that it was much more spacious than before. It wasn't until he reached the front door of his house that he heard a rough voice coming from inside. "Eldest miss, what are you saying?" "I'm not leaving. I won't leave no matter what. I've lived for so long, how can I be afraid of these little thieves?" This was Fang's voice. Another voice followed. "Hee hee, young miss, we all know where the food you gave us for the past 2 years came from. If we leave now, are we still human?" After this voice was heard, several voices in the courtyard immediately echoed it. T. Do you really think we're pushovers? We'll listen to Fang this time. We won't leave. When Li Yi pushed the door open and walked in, everyone turned to look at him. Lu Rui was stunned. The next moment she quickly walked over and asked, "Husband, why are you back?" Li Yi looked at her and said, "Everyone follow me back to the prefectural city. No matter how bold they are, they won't dare to act wildly in the city." There were more than 1,000 guards in the prefectural city. As long as those people appeared in large numbers, the government would not ignore them. If those people dared to make a move in the prefectural city, they would not be able to escape even if they had wings. But here they did not have to worry so much. "Husband, you know all about it?" Lu Rui looked at him and asked. Li Yi looked at her. Was she planning to hide such a big thing from him? Lu Rui smiled and said, "What will come will come. Don't worry, husband. Actually, I'm very skilled in martial arts. Those people are nothing to be afraid of." Lu Rui knew better than anyone else about the methods of the people in the forest. If she did not teach them an unforgettable lesson, she was afraid that there would be endless trouble in the future. She could be a thief for 1,000 days, but she could not guard against thieves for 1,000 days. Although she was not afraid of them, it was hard to guarantee that they would not attack from other areas. She turned around and pointed at a few people, including Fang, and said, "Uncle Fang, you go back to the city with the son-in-law first. I'm enough here." No. Although Rui was skilled in martial arts, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Wuxia said that there were dozens of them. Li Yi could not let her stay here no matter what. However, just as he was about to object, he suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck. In the next moment, dizziness and darkness came over him. "Husband, I'm sorry." He saw Lu Rui take back her hand and hold him up. She looked at him apologetically, opened her mouth and then lost consciousness. Uncle Fong, I'll leave the son-in-law to you. Looking at first Miss and then at the fainted son-in-law, Fong finally nodded helplessly. When Li Yi woke up, he felt that the whole world was shaking. He opened his eyes and the ground below him was moving backward rapidly. This posture was very familiar and the feeling was very familiar. The horse under him was even more familiar. Stop! Li Yi shouted. Fong, who was in front of him, pulled the reins and the horse gradually stopped. Fong kindly reminded him, "Son-in-law, don't think about going back. First Miss will knock you out again. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for you to wake up the second time." Fong's words were very reasonable. Although she had a gentle temperament, it was not easy to change her mind once she had decided on something. At least, Li Yi could not change her mind. He would settle the score with her after this matter was over. The most important thing was how to get through the current crisis. Li Yi sat up straight on the horse and urged, "Go to the prefectural city." After entering the prefectural city, Li Yi did not return to Rui workshop. Instead, he and Fong went straight in the direction of Prince Ning's mansion. Now he could only rely on Li Xian's power. The bailiffs and bailiffs of the county government were not enough in front of those people. The guards of Prince Ning's mansion were all skilled and there were many of them. If he could borrow some, it would be a great hindrance to those people. "Young master, please wait here for a moment. I will immediately go and inform the crown prince." The servants of Prince Ning's mansion had a very good memory. Last time at the Wang Fei's birthday banquet, housekeeper Wang was very polite to this young master. Of course he didn't dare to slight him now. He politely had Li Yi wait here and quickly ran in. "Son-in-law, is that pretty boy really the young prince?" Fong had long known the identity of Li Xian, but he still couldn't connect that unreliable pretty boy with the crown prince of Prince Ning. "That's right." Li Yi nodded his head. After receiving confirmation from Li Yi, Fong's worried heart finally relaxed. He didn't know how strong the power of the Prince Ning's mansion was, but the guards that he was familiar with were not just for show. If there were a few more of these people, he would have more confidence in dealing with the motley crowd. "Apologies, the young prince is not here." The servant went in quickly and came out quickly. He spoke apologetically to Li Yi. "Not here?" Li Yi furrowed his brow and said, "Please help me inform the crown prince that I want to see the crown prince." Li Yi had never interacted with Prince Ning before. If he hadn't encountered a situation like today, he probably wouldn't have gone to see the crown prince of his own accord. But at this moment he couldn't care so much. The servant still had a smile on his face and said, "Young master, my apologies, but the crown prince is also not in the fu." The expression on Li Yi's face froze and he seemed to understand something. He turned to look at Fong and said, "Let's go." "Go where?" Fong was puzzled. He hadn't even seen the person he was supposed to see. Why was the son-in-law leaving? "The medicine shop." "Why are we going to the medicine shop?" Fong was even more puzzled. "To buy some arsenic. If we can't beat them, to avoid being humiliated, it's better to take some medicine and commit suicide." Seeing Li Yi and old Fong's silhouettes disappear from afar, the servant looked around and returned to the prince's mansion. He passed through several long corridors and knocked on the door of a certain building. After getting a response, he pushed the door open and walked in. "Your Highness, they have been sent away." "I know. You can leave now." A voice came from the table in the middle of the room. The servant bowed respectfully and slowly retreated. Both His Majesty and the princess seemed to value this boy. The crown prince also has a close relationship with him. "Your Highness, why?" An old voice came from the corner. Before the words could finish, Prince Ning waved his hand and interrupted. Thinking of Li Xian's recent changes, Prince Ning frowned and said, "He does have some crooked talents, but he can't show them in public. If Xianer hangs out with him all day, I'm afraid the disadvantages outweigh the advantages." After Prince Ning spoke, there was no more sound from the corner of the study. Chapter 230. "You guys, come here, come here. Stop looking, I'm talking to you guys. What's in this bucket?" Qing and prefectural cities north, south, east and west city gates. These 2 days the checks on people going in and out were much more detailed than usual. When a few men in rough clothing pushed a large cart out of the city, a knife-wielding guard walked over and asked aloud. The man pushing the cart smiled, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. He said, "Hee, it's filled with feces. We were planning to take it outside the city and pour it out. Sir, do you want to open it and take a look?" "Feces?" When the guard heard this, he immediately covered his nose and took a closer look. The wooden barrel was filled with black filth. Even though he covered his nose, he could still smell the stench. Hey, is there a problem? If there's no problem, then hurry up and let them go. Stinks. After the cart stopped here, the stench quickly spread in all directions. Another guard, who was slightly further away, frowned and said loudly, "Forget it, you guys should hurry up and leave." The guard covered his nose with one hand and waved the other as if he were shooing away flies. Although the higher-ups had requested for a detailed check, there were countless people entering and exiting the city every day. They wouldn't look closely at something like this. "Thank you, sir." The man laughed and pushed the cart out. The people beside him naturally followed. Not long after, a group of porters and travelers followed them out of the city gates. After less than an hour, figures gradually gathered in a temple in the mountains far from the prefectural city. Brother Zhu was too rash just now. He really shouldn't have attacked that bailiff. Otherwise, we wouldn't have left the city in such a hurry. The brawny man surnamed Zhou looked at the bald man and shook his head. Zhu Tufu grinned. Brother Zhou's courage is a bit too small. Isn't it just a bailiff? To be honest, I can't even count the number of bailiffs I've killed over the years with one hand. Humph, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have had to leave the city so early. The thin woman with a scar on her face snorted coldly. Seeing that the woman who spoke was the third lady, Zhu Tufu didn't argue with her. He turned around and asked the sturdy man, "Brother Zhou, have you figured out that place yet? Why don't we kill our way there now and take that woman's head? After that, everyone can go their separate ways?" Among the crowd there were obviously quite a few people who saw Zhu Tufu as their leader. When they heard him speak, they all chimed in. Directly or indirectly, they all had some enmity with that woman. They heard that her martial arts skill was very high, but with so many of them, there was no need to be afraid of her. That woman lives in the Willow Leaf village. She can't run away. But it's broad daylight and there are so many of us. I'm afraid we'll attract too much attention. Let's wait patiently. We'll act when it's dark. The sturdy man thought for a while and said, "That woman is really hateful. My brother's death can finally be avenged. Whoever obtains her head can go to Senior Han and claim credit for it. If Senior Han takes you in as a disciple, your martial cultivation will definitely improve. I'm more interested in Squire Zhao's reward." In the dilapidated temple on the mountain, there were many figures and the low murmurs seemed to be a little noisy. Big Brother will be able to avenge Ahu's death soon. Next to the sturdy man surnamed Zhou, a few men gathered there. Their faces were full of joy. The sturdy man looked around the dilapidated temple. Zhu Tufu, Death Scurrying Ghost, the third lady, and Evil Manning. Although the midget didn't come, these 4 people, along with him and a few of his brothers, should be enough to deal with Lu Rui. If she had helpers by her side, the remaining dozens of people should be able to deal with her. Moreover, with Senior Han and Squire Zhao's invitation, who knew how many people were secretly watching her? If she didn't break through to the Grandmaster realm in such a short time, then she could only wait to die. Even if she really did break through. How could that be possible? Raising his head to look outside, the sturdy man surnamed Zhou clenched his fists. Looking at the sky, it would be night in a few hours. What are you doing here? In an exquisite courtyard in the prefectural city, Li Emingzu was dressed in a tight outfit. The constable's waist saber seemed to have turned into a white chain in her hands. From time to time, the sound of air tearing could be heard from the courtyard. It's too boring in the prince's mansion. Originally, I wanted to go to Rui workshop to look for Li Yi, but he's not here, so I can only come here. Li Xian squatted on the ground not far away and used a branch to write and draw on the ground. They were all strange patterns. As he drew, he muttered to himself, "I've solved the problem that he taught me to make things difficult for Teacher Chen. I only needed to turn 2 unknowns into 3, but after several days of calculation, this problem actually has 4 different answers." The old woman with white hair and a face full of wrinkles stood in the corridor. She didn't understand what the crown prince was talking about, and her eyes were fixed on the saber-wielding woman in the courtyard. Ever since that day, the amount of time the princess spent practicing martial arts every day had increased. Since she was young, she had been very competitive and wanted to do her best at everything. That day in Rui workshop, she had probably been stimulated by that woman. A young man walked over from afar. Seeing the situation in the courtyard, he quietly stood to the side. When the princess stopped, he quickly walked forward and bowed respectfully. He said, "I have already investigated." The strange movements of the people in the Lulan forest these 2 days are because of a woman called Lu Rui, That woman has helped the government capture many wanted criminals these 2 years and has offended the people in the Lulan forest. I'm afraid that those people will act tonight. Qing'anfu was not the capital. Even if he was following the princess' orders, it was not so easy to investigate some things. After investigating today, he spent some time organizing and told the whole story. Lu Rui? Mingzhu's brow furrowed slightly. She felt that she had heard this name somewhere before. The sky was dark and the drawings on the ground could not be seen clearly. Li Xian threw down the branch in his hand and walked over. He said, "What did you say just now, Lu Rui, Li Yi's wife? What happened?" Mingzhu finally remembered where she had heard this name and her pretty face changed slightly. What? Not long after, Li Xian's mouth opened wide and his face darkened. A moment later, a dozen or so figures rushed out of the courtyard. At the same time, in Ningguangfu not far away, including Li Xian's own guards, there were about a dozen or so people on horses that rushed out of the side door and quickly disappeared into the night. "Princess, wait here patiently. Once there is news, I will immediately send someone to pass on the message." The old woman had already straightened her back. After giving her instructions, she followed closely behind those people. "Motherf *Ker, looks like we have to hurry up. Don't let others get ahead of us." Under the night sky, a dozen or so figures rushed along the mountain path. Zhu Tufu laughed and urged. Along the way they actually saw many people from the green forest. They were most likely going in the same direction as them. Of course, those people were in groups of 2 or 3 at most. When they saw them, most of them stayed far away. There were also some who were willing to join them. After identifying their identities, they did not refuse and the group gradually grew larger. "Who is it?" A noise came from behind them and someone immediately turned around. From a corner on the mountain path, a few figures suddenly appeared. Those people did not seem to think that there would be so many people waiting for them after a corner. They seemed to be frightened by the situation in front of them. They stood where they were and did not move. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.